Madam President, we're live for our budget workshop here Saturday morning. So just a friendly reminder to all of our participants here to speak in the mic was the request from IT. So with that, Madam President, is there anything that you want to open up before we start? So I'm gonna turn it over to Mr. Brown, and the kind of objective here today is we're going to do like a 5-minute refresher because we may have folks tuning in or with us that need that little high-level overview. We're not going to spend a lot of time on that. And then the budget office is really divided into cost savings into really 3 buckets. The first one you've seen, but we're going to go through that very quickly. We'll hit the second and the third buckets and have discussion there. And then hopefully if time permits, but as requested, you have a packet in front of you which has a series of budget questions asked by Board of Education members. And so we will be happy to go down through those one by one, or if you want to take a look at it and we can talk about individual or certain questions, we'll do that as we go forward. This budget workshop is scheduled from 9 a.m., but we're about 9:15 for 2 hours till, we'll say 11:15 to make it correct. And if there are no other questions, we'll dive right into it. So welcome, Mr. Brown, our Chief Financial Officer, the budget wizard, all the way from Sheridan, Arkansas.
Yes. All right, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So as Dr. Paluski stated, we may have some people tuned in that have not tuned in previously on some of the information that we've covered regarding the budget overview that we've covered in past meetings. So I'm going to briefly run through this to sort of set the stage on where the $5.1 million comes from. So we're on the document. I've provided some printed copies here at the table and also provided the link to you via email.
Question, before you go into that, can you clarify why we need the 5.1, but we actually need 9 million all total?
Yes. So there is the 5.1 million is the calculation of funding that the net loss of funding that we will experience in fiscal year 26. But the board and employees have continuously expressed a desire for the board to invest funding annually in salary increases. So those salary increases, you have to have room in the budget in order to invest annually. So the 5.1 balances our budget, but that doesn't get us in a healthy financial environment where we can invest in salaries going forward. So while we talk about the 5.1, we've also talked about tightening the belt so that we can have funding available to us to invest annually in our salary schedules. The salary schedules, it costs a little bit less than $2.5 million. This is just an example. The cost is $2.5 million to invest 2% raise annually for employees.
Please say that one more time.
The cost is 2.4 something, so just shy of 2.5 million to invest 2% raise for employees annually. So, creating the 5.1 plus 2.6, that sort of gives you an idea of where we would need to be to have room to invest annually in employee salaries. Now that shy of 2.5 million invests 2% in salary increases, with the exception of employees that earn less than $15 per hour. For the employees that earn less than $15 per hour, that would be a 4% increase. So that 2.4 million calculation is 2% for all employees except those that earn less than $15 an hour. And we've calculated a 4% raise for them. And that's an effort. The board has always expressed an interest in trying to close the gap on the difference between employees that earn more than $15 an hour and those that earn less than $15 an hour. So 2% of a smaller salary is a smaller investment, so we calculated a 4%, a double investment in those, trying to close the gap. So the 2.4 incorporates that into the calculation. So does that answer your question, Dr. Redis?
Yes.
Okay.
Could I follow
Yes.
that question up? So if we went to the 9 million, let's say, does that get us just through the first year of being able to give the 2%?
As long as we keep our expenses in check. So if we create that $9 million room, then that would, in a sense, remain as long as student enrollment doesn't decrease and our expenses don't increase. If student enrollment decreases, then you'd have to decrease expenses to keep that $9 million gap in the budget in order to invest annually in salaries. So while it wouldn't, once you invest in it, then once you invest the funds in the salary schedule, they're in there. It's a committed expense, and you have to have that room in your budget to create that. But if expenses were to increase or to stay the same, and the trend of enrollment goes down, and you don't have the $9 million, then that would affect future investments. So it would be a year-to-year evaluation to say, do we have the room to invest?
So that would get us there, and then we'd have to stick with that budget
Yes.
and make it tight so that we could continue to do that each year.
Yes.
And-
If you make the cuts on the front and then things are added back and your expenses increase and your enrollment doesn't increase and your enrollment decreases, you're right back where you started, which is not having a healthy financial budget in order to invest in employee salaries. Yes, ma'am.
Because I know you, this does include the increase in benefits, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Is this a common practice for healthy school districts, healthy financial school districts?
Yes, and not all school districts are able to invest every year in salary schedules, but that's the desire of all school districts, to be able to contribute to the employee salary schedules annually. We've just not been there because of our enrollment. It's been declining for 15 years, and that historical trend is in our budget overview. But the state increases our state foundation funding annually, and what we've experienced in the past is the state's increased contribution to the state foundation funding has outpaced our declining enrollment. But in recent years, in the 5 years, student enrollment has outpaced the state's investment in the state foundation funding. So that has created the budget concern that we're dealing with right now. Is our main focus, our main budget impact is the loss of student enrollment, and we'll cover that here in just a second.
One more question. When you
Yes.
talk about expenses, 80% of our expenses is personnel and benefits, correct?
That's correct. Roughly 80%. It's a little bit shy of that, but for round numbers, it's 80%. Yes. Okay. So as I alluded to, our average daily membership, our student enrollment, at the page 2 of this budget overview, that first graph addresses our first concern, which is the declining student enrollment. And you'll see a historical graph there. And again, in the end, if you could imagine, if you look at the screen that I'm pointing at up here, if you could imagine prior to 2020, the trend line that you if you would imagine drawing a straight line down this data set point, it's a downward trend, but it's not a steep downward trend. Now if you take from 19 to 24 and imagine a line, that the straight line through that would be a declining enrollment, but it's a steep enrollment. And that's what I was talking about when we talk about the state investing money in the state foundation funding. So they increase our amount that we get per pupil. In the past, this decreased but less steep line, the investment the state has made in the state foundation funding has been sufficient for us. It's not created room. The increased revenue has not created room, but it's been enough to offset our expenditures that we've had over those years. But as you can see, the enrollment, which is our revenue source for state foundation funding, that line is much steeper now. We're losing, and what that means is we're losing students at a faster rate than we have in the past.
So that was 18.
That was 19 to 24. So
Okay.
that line, if you were to imagine a straight line through that data set, it's a much steeper line. So if you're losing your revenue source faster than your budget can absorb, that becomes problematic for you.
And remind me again, it's how much per student?
This year, it's $7,771 per student.
That we're losing.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. And then page 3, of course, is the source of our revenue it's the main source of our state revenue from ADE. This is our state aid notice. And if you'll notice, between the top 2 lines, that's the data that sets the stage for your funding, which is the bottom section of this report. And line 10 is the ADM. Line 10 is your driving factor. Line 10 is your ADM that drives the funding for this state aid notice. And you can see for 23-24, which is last year, we were funded at 7,250 students. And we'll cover some data a little bit later. And preliminary, the third quarter ADM for this year is not finalized. It won't be finalized until spring break. That's the end of our third quarter. But of course, we monitor that. And our monitoring shows that we're on track to lose about 80 more students this year. Of course, the state will come in, they'll do a final calculation. Ours is an average that we do, but it gives us a good indication. I mean, we would know whether we're expecting an increase or a decrease. And this year, we're expecting a decrease of about 80 additional students, which will impact next year's funding. Next year's funding is based off of this year's enrollment. This year's enrollment will be determined at the end of 3 quarters.
And Mr. Brown, just in that point, that's close to nearly $750,000
That's correct.
in those 88 students.
That's expected to be lost for
Yeah.
next year.
Yes. Of course, we were talking about line 28, the state foundation funding, and Dr. Redis, there's that number that I quoted to you, 7,000 on line 28. In parentheses, $7,771. That's per student funding. And you'll notice that line 31 is our ALE funding. Out in parentheses, you'll see the current ALE funding rate is $5,086 per student. Line 32, ELL, $366 per student. Line 33, which is our ESA funding, if you'll notice in parentheses, there's 3 different amounts there. The first amount is if you are less than 70% free and reduced lunch. The middle amount is if you're more than 70% but less than 90%. And then the $1,600 $13 is if you are more than 90% free and reduced lunch. And one of our budget issues that we're dealing with right now is that our free and reduced lunch rate, when we certified our CEP rate, that dropped from 84% to 66% district-wide, which causes the funding calculation there. We're moving from $1,076 per student to $538 per student.
You said,
That creates the ESSA funding loss that we'll be discussing in just a
you
moment.
said 60, how much what's our percentage?
66%,
Okay, thank
and
you.
70 is the magic number, 70%. That's what keeps us in that middle funding zone of $1,076 per student.
And Mr. Brown, just to clarify that too, to make sure that I'm clear as well as the board and the public, part of that change had been the changes from DHS as it relates to who qualifies for free and reduced. That out of the pandemic, they had loosened that for obvious reasons, and now they're tightening that back up.
That's correct. So prior to COVID, we certified our CEP rate at a percentage higher than 70%. And during COVID, they relaxed some restrictions from DHS that allowed families to qualify for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP. That is the number that DHS feeds into the state system, and that number times a multiplier, and the current multiplier is 1.6. So we take all of our students that qualify for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, we take that number, multiply by 1.6, that gives us our free and reduced lunch rate that's district-wide. That, prior to COVID, we certified we were above 70%. As long as I've been in finance, we have always been above 70%. Whether we did the CEP certification or we did free and reduced lunch forms, those traditional forms that went home for parents to fill out and sign and send back. It's been close some years, but we've always been above that 70%. Post-COVID, DHS either reenacted or changed some of the requirements for families to continue to qualify for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP. And that caused some of our families to drop off of the DHS assistance program, which in turn reduced our numbers that fed into our system, which in turn reduced our overall free and reduced lunch rate that the district has experienced. So that dropped us below 70%, and as you can see, the middle number, $1,076 per student, is the amount for 70% schools. It drops us to 538, so it cuts our funding in half in ESA, which is another budget issue that has affected, that is counted in the 5.1. So again, these are all funding sources that are driven by the data above. And if you'll notice here, now we talked about that trend line a moment ago on the student ADM. This is the trend line for state foundation funding. So if you'll notice, let's take again, here's the dividing point. So 2019, let's look at this dividing point. So state foundation funding, if you recall, student enrollment was trending down. But our state foundation funding amount per child was increasing. The increase in funding outpaced the
decrease in students.
decrease in student enrollment, which allowed this trend line of the actual funding to increase. So we were still increasing, even though we've been decreasing in students over 15 years, our amount of state foundation funding increased. So the budget impact to us on losing students was minimal back then. But if you'll notice the change, 2019 and forward. So 2019 and forward, now that trend line is not going up. That trend line is trending down. And that means your funding, your loss of funding is outpacing, your loss of funding and is not outpacing the increase in state foundation funding. So we're actually seeing a decrease in state foundation funding, which is a decrease in revenue, which means expenses have to be addressed at this point. Also wanted to, I have a slide in here on bonded debt savings. You all refinanced our bonded debt, and we have scheduled savings. I just wanted to point out that fiscal year 25 this year is the last year that we will schedule $7.5 million to go to the building fund. You had refinanced and you said we want to take that savings and apply it to the building fund for construction projects. This will be the last year of that refinance savings. Next year we'll have a decreased amount of savings, and then in fiscal year 27 it's further reduced to $1 million for the next 5 years. And this is just a graph of our bonded debt service payment. You'll notice, and I just want to point out here, back in 2011, 2012, there was a big spike here. The board voted to pay off early some bonded debt and lease payments that they had on the books. That was part of the savings plan back in 2015. That created a one-year spike in our bonded debt payment, but that's the reason for that. The board, as part of a savings plan, paid off some early debt. But as you'll notice, this in 2022, 2021, when you all refinanced our bonded debt, then our bonded debt payment since 2022 has been relatively small compared to the $12.8 million that we pay on a regular basis. And again, 2025, we have a $5 million payment, which creates the room for that $7 million, because we have $12 million invested in our bonded debt, 12 to 13 million invested in bonded debt payment. We're only paying $5 million on the principal or on interest, and we deferred principal payments for a period of time up front where you could invest money in the construction projects. And again, that will increase back to 2027. That will increase back to $12 million, and then eventually back up to 12.8 million where we were. And we talked about the ESA funding. This is our free and reduced lunch rate that has decreased below 70%, and we're moving from that $1,076 per student to $538 per student. The state does not take all of that from you all at one time.
You said it was, time out, you said it was, moving from what amount to what amount for the student?
All right, so I'm going to scroll back up to page 3 here.
Oh, that 538?
Yes, so
Okay,
the
gotcha.
$1,076 per student, we're moving to $538 per
Gotcha.
student
Okay.
in ESA funding. This is how that will transpire over the next few years, this assumes that we cannot reverse that trajectory. And the district is weighing options in terms of monitoring the direct certification numbers that come in to us to see, has the enrollment of families in the supplemental nutrition assistance program, have the enrollment of families increased sufficiently for our formula to get us above 70%. If it does, we can recertify early and lock our funding back in and reverse this funding loss. Not for next year. Next year is set. I'm talking about for fiscal year 27. So we know next year we're losing ESA funding. But we can also change the method from CEP to Provision 2. Provision 2, your students still eat free, according to Ms. Dennis, they still eat free, but it does require that we send the forms home for parents to fill out, and you have to reach that 70% threshold of families that qualify for free and reduced lunch. So we're weighing those options. However, just looking at this page 7.
Brian, can I ask just a quick question?
Yes.
Because I know we talked about this earlier. I don't know the process completely, but how do we know we got back all the forms that everybody participated in helping us find out if we qualified? I mean, I don't know the process, so,
Are you talking about since we dropped?
like, we knew yes.
Okay, so there are no forms in the current process that we use from CEP. It is totally calculated by DHS, and they feed the number into our system,
Okay,
and then a multiplier is applied.
okay.
So no forms in our current
So
system.
there's nothing we could have done about that. It's just
That's
whoever
correct.
had applied with DHS, and that's what we get.
That's correct.
Okay,
That's right.
all right.
However, we can change the process, we can change our, from CEP to Provision 2, which would require us to send home the forms.
So how then would we make sure we were getting back, I mean,
That would be it. We would be, marshaling every single resource that we have to make sure that we're, doing outreach in our communities to our parents to make sure that they fill out those forms.
Yes.
how bad are those forms?
I mean, sometimes it can be difficult to.
They're not fun.
They're not fun.
They're not fun, and it would be, it has always in the past been a task in getting those forms back.
Yep.
But,
We would tackle it to try to do it in the
Yes.
most, user-friendly way for families. But it will take a whole system approach to make sure that families fill out the survey form.
Yeah, well, I can remember doing that in the past,
Yeah.
and it is a huge task. But
There-
that's the
there's
way
some
we
ch-
used
there-
to have to do it.
There's some
though.
challenges to it, for sure.
And confusing.
Yeah.
Can we see one of those? Is it possible for us just to see one of those forms?
Sure.
like
Sure.
Sure, we can.
What we're asking everybody to do?
we'll get Ms. Dennis to put that in your weekly board report. We'll link a electronic form in there for you to see that. Yes, sir.
How much do we have to, how many forms or how many people qualified for this do we have to achieve to meet the 70 or the 74% or higher?
So it would have to be 70% of our student enrollment.
I understand that. You said right now we're at 66.
Yes.
So how many more do we have to go to get there?
Well,
What's
you
the
would
gap?
start, so you wouldn't get to pick up with 66.
You'd start
You
all
would
over.
have
You'd
to,
start all
you
over.
start from 0.
Understand that.
I think his question is
I
what
want a
percentage
number.
of our people
Oh.
would
So-
have to
I want a number.
participate?
I want to know how many people.
When you take our students and multiply that by .7.
So 70 more?
I'd have to do the mathematics on that.
Okay, so I can understand that.
Yeah, we're, today, 77,822.
So this
To
is
be
based
exact.
on pre-K as well?
That is
as-
pre-K as well.
Need almost 5,500 students.
That qualified, not that.
They're
just fill out the
qualified,
forms.
not just fill the forms out, they
Yeah,
have to
that
qualify.
qualified.
I guess maybe I'm not asking the question right.
You're asking for the difference.
Yes.
How many more students
Right.
now would need to qualify than
Right.
currently qualify?
So,
So we would need, so roughly, we have, let's just use 75%. So 10% of our student enrollment would be 700. 5% would be 350. So it'd be around 350 more students
Additional
would need to
students right
qualify
now.
to get us to the 70%.
Okay.
And I'm just using round numbers, but that's approximate. 3 to 350 would get us over the 70% threshold.
it's
Okay.
amazing, we've gone over this budget that you gave us several times now, and every time we go over it, we still have questions
Yeah.
and things that we have to remind ourselves
Sure.
of when we're looking at those numbers.
Yes. So on the page 7, the ESA funding, as I mentioned, here is our current funding is at $1,076 per student in fiscal year '25. And in '26, our funding will drop to $538 per student. Now, that is a net loss, if you look here, of $2.912 million. But what the state will do is they'll implement that funding loss over a 3-year period. So they're not going to take it all at once, but they're going to take a third of the funding that you lost in the next year. So fiscal year '26 is set. We're losing, it's roughly $990,000. I've rounded it to $1 million for simple terms. We're losing $1 million in ESA funding in fiscal year '26. And if we don't reverse the trend and get our free and reduced lunch above 70% in fiscal year '27, they will take an additional $1 million. And then in fiscal year '28, they will take the final additional $1 million to get us to a funding level of $538 per student.
Okay, well, that, just a quick clarification. If we are able to certify it higher next year, does the next 2 years that that we owe them, they don't collect that?
That's correct. So if we can recertify, if we can recertify and get our numbers above 70%, then they will step us back up. So let's say we don't get our numbers recertified next year. We will step down an additional $1 million. But in the next year, if we certify, they will step us back up.
Okay.
So we won't get all the money back, just like they were taking it in 1/3 increments. If we reverse it, we get it back in 1/3 increments. So
Okay, all right.
it's all about timing and how they distribute that, and the rules on the funding.
So with that being said, and knowing that we have to get, the mic worn over there. So with that being said, and knowing that we have to get these applications in the hands of these families to make sure that we do qualify, we don't miss any federal dollars, are we getting or have a plan in place to make sure that families understand and know that this information is important as far as getting it done? Or will we get a plan in place?
Well, absolutely. That's part of the process where we're getting ready to make that switch or that change is when does the green light go on?
Mm-hmm.
And we've talked about what that plan could look like. We're going to need a lot of support at the school-based level. This is why it's so important to have that community connection with families and these smaller networks within, so we can, connect with families to make sure that they fill out the form.
And I just want to make sure that since we are live, that, with every piece of paper that comes home, it's not coming home just to sit on the kitchen counter. It's very important, and it is imperative that we look at the information and see what needs to be filled out and turned in a timely fashion. And because it is important that if a sheet of paper comes home or information, that it is looked at and read
And I would like to also say
and
that
acted on.
the forms are not only connected to school funding.
Mm-hmm.
It's connected to benefits that that are afforded to students.
Families would qualify.
So if a student who qualifies for free and reduced lunch could also get a free ACT test,
Mm-hmm.
free of charge.
You want to explain what an ACT test is?
ACT test is the American College Entrance Exam. So that's the exam that students must take in order to apply for entrance to college. And of course, those do cost money.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe the school provides one free one, but they could take an additional free one if they are in the free and reduced lunch. So there's a benefit to students and parents to get this form back. And I'm sure that there are other benefits that are afforded to students as well, other than just the ACT, but it also affects funding for each school's Title I program.
Is that one free one per year or one
Yes.
free one in general? Okay, one free one per year.
Also, in the plan, we're gonna ensure that there is a resource at each school to help to complete the form, to make sure that they understand the form, because just sitting at home, they know it's important, but I don't get it. To be
Yes.
able to come to the school
Correct, and I think you bring
to
up a
get
very
help.
valuable point about the work that we need to do to support children and their families with wraparound services like you're talking about. That's, almost look at those as school ambassadors, if you will. They're the ones that can help in that connectivity to making sure that the forms are filled out.
Can we start, you were talking about a green light. Do we have to wait until next school year, or can we start now with forms, or?
Those, unfortunately, you have to use the current year form that's released by the Child Nutrition Office. They don't release those forms, and I'd have to defer to Ms. Dennis, but I think it's in July when they release the form for the year. So the forms are dated, and they're updated annually, and you're required to use the most recent form. So
When would those need to be collected, Mr. Brown? If they start in July, is that before the school year?
yes, there is
So
a
like
deadline. I believe it's
September 1st?
maybe October 1. I'm not sure.
Similar on the federal
Yeah.
enrollment cycle?
I can't speak to that. Actually, no, ma'am. No, ma'am. No, ma'am. No, ma'am. This is a budget workshop. No, ma'am.
Okay, you ain't
No,
got to
ma'am.
get all loud with me
No,
and
ma'am.
all
I wanted
agitated.
to
I was
pause.
okay. That's
Thank you.
fine. We can just say
Pause.
pause. But what I was
So-
just trying.
Go ahead.
What I was saying was I was trying to get a clarity as to make sure as far as how the process will go. So since you said that, thank you for that. But we go bring our voices
So
down.
in
when
the
we talking to
past, what
Angela.
we've done with those forms, we've sent them home in the beginning, and we've had them at open houses.
Gotcha.
So when we have open house, we have those forms, we have all of our staff
Sure.
already there, and we've taken the opportunity to have those ambassadors, those teachers, the counselors, the principals,
Yeah.
talk to the parents and say, hey,
Sure.
this is something that can help you and
Sure.
assist you.
However,
That is
that's
the way
not
we've
getting
done in the
right?
past. So because we have not had to send
Right.
those forms home the last recent years, we've not had to do that.
Sure.
Any foster child in our system also qualifies for this
Sure.
immediately.
And we'll be happy to when the time comes. I know we got a lot to cover today, and this is a whole topic in and of itself. We'll certainly come back when the time is right to discuss with the board. Here's our plan of attack on how we're going to communicate this, how we're going to monitor this, and make sure that our families fill out the forms.
So, page 8 of the budget overview is just a summary. So we have loss of state foundation funding, which we've covered, that's tied to enrollment. We have the ESA funding loss, the first year of the ESA funding loss, which we have covered. We also had the $1.4 million, the reorg plan from last year that was reorganizing the ESSER funds, positions tied to ESSER funds. We were reorganizing those into title budgets that was paused. So instead of it going to title budgets, we had to pull it into the operational budget. That was an increased operational expense that was not planned for, that was unexpected. So the 1.4, the $1 million in ESSER, the 2.7 in state foundation funding. This is the 5.1. This is the 5.1 million that we're discussing. So a lot, I just wanted to take time in case we had new people that we've been discussing this for a long period of time. I mean, since we discussed our budget back in September. But I just wanted to take time to review this in case we have new people tuning in that may not know, where does the 5.1 come from? What are you all talking about? Why are you losing funding? And this is the reason. It's student enrollment, loss of student enrollment. It is a change in our free and reduced lunch rate, and it was the pause of a reorganization plan from last year that caused the 5.1 million operational budget issue.
And Mr. Brown, just to make sure the audience clarifies as well, we had budgeted just about $1.5 million to give all of our employees a raise last year. But due to the fact that that plan came so late, that money had to be moved over. That's the reason why we couldn't give employee raises last year. We had prepared for it, but because that had to be put on hold,
Yes,
that
so-
had to get moved over.
So the funding we had set aside for the raises had to be pulled back to accommodate the ESSER reorg that was paused last year. So, yes.
And just real quick, did the state increase the amount they were paying per student this year? Did I dream that? I was thinking that
Yeah,
it did go up.
It's in legislation right now, and I think I think it's both in the House and the Senate.
I think Colonel can
And
speak to that. Speak
There
to
are
the mic.
two, sorry, my voice is going. There are two bills, one in the House and one in the Senate, that both propose that. However, they've been deferred, which is typical for any kind of spending bill to the end of the session. And they're just authorization bills. Just because they authorize it, you have to have that. And then they'll do the Revenue Stabilization Act, which is the big spending bill at the end. It would have to be in there, so it all remains to be seen. Right
Okay.
now, they may not even get out of committee, who knows? But there are two identical bills, one in the House and one in the Senate, to do just that. But at this point, who knows?
Okay, all right.
And that would increase, Colonel, the per pupil allocation to 8,100?
Over 2 consecutive years,
I see.
83, then it reduces to 81. Assuming either one of them passes in that form, if it winds up getting passed, it could be amended. I mean, both of them have been deferred since they were introduced even before the session started, and they're still sitting there.
Gotcha, something we'll pay attention to.
So nothing we can count on, but I just, for some reason, that was in the back of my head. I just wanted clarification. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else as it relates to this high-level overview? And we'll move on to the next thing.
So you said the original plan for the ESSER payment was to use what funds?
Title I.
Okay. And that was put on hold.
Yes, sir.
Why?
Well, in the short of it, it was assigned in September of 2023 with a delivery date of December. That was not met. That timeline was not met. And then it got extended, it got extended, it got extended. The Board of Education, since we've been here, has an expectation when a reorganization comes before the board. They're expected a level of expectation. By the time it got there, it was too late, meaning we were up against contracts at the time, and then the recommendation was to put a pause, do a partial reorganization, which just took away the stipend. So all those individuals still had jobs, and that reorganization was tied directly to multi-classroom leaders. And I know we talked about this in a little bit of and that plan had a whole history of background, how opportunity culture came, how it got splintered, how we were using about $2.7 million, and it just wasn't organized as well as it should have been. Since that time, there had been literacy coaches, math coaches, instructional coaches, kind of all over the place. That was kind of part one of it. Part two is we had some schools have human service workers, some do not. Some have parent engagement professionals, some do not. That part of that plan was to reorganize those individuals in that group. So we had decided that it was in the best interest. I remember Ms. Stumpenhouse was there and provided feedback, and we listened to our LPPC and CPPC as it related to some of their concerns, and just felt at the time it wasn't right for our employees to go through with that at that time because it came out so late in April. So with that, we knew going into this year that has to be reorganized, and hence that's part of this next proposal that I was going to present last night, or hopefully next week, that tackles that issue.
Okay.
It makes sense.
Right, and just to tie into that, because some people ask the question, hey, you knew this was coming. We did, and we were doing everything to prepare for that first step last year. But because that did not happen, that now falls into this year that also has to be addressed.
So okay. The plan was Title I last year. The plan this year is not Title I.
So that funding, and you'll see as we go forward, the original positions, which was the Division of Curriculum Instruction that got created upon my arrival, that's really the reorganization phase one. Not to do a whole history lesson here, but when I arrived in the district, you had 2 individuals that oversaw all elementary schools, all secondary schools, all curriculum, all staff development, all data. The job was, in and of itself, as it was designed, was just too overarching in the responsibility. And so we had no curriculum coordinators at the time. So when you don't have anyone that's coordinating an instructional program pre-K through 12 in any of your content areas, then that's been a lack of cohesion and support across the district. So if you go all the way back to the 2021 curriculum management audit, it takes a deep dive into those systemic issues. I think I told you when I arrived in 100 days, I interviewed 189 teachers about the support that they're getting. There was a big gap in curriculum systemic coordination. So that's where those jobs got created, knowing that in a 2-year period, we were going to have to find room in other budgets to bring them in.
Okay.
All right, you ready to roll?
Yes, sir.
Any other questions on the budget book? We'll keep it rolling. Okay, you got it, Mr. Bing.
All right, so what we have here is just the savings options that we have calculated. So this is what we covered at our last workshop. And I can go through these just very quickly. We've covered these before. There was a reduction in software. Oh, it's not printed.
Okay, gotcha.
This
Okay.
is not printed. This is just by link
Gotcha.
that's been shared, or it's projected
Yeah.
here. And I can make this larger for people so you can see this. So we have one of the options was a reduction in software. If you recall, the green means that's within the superintendent's purview, and then anything that's coded yellow would require board action. So as we get through these.
For the public, can you explain that?
Yes, so the items that are colored green are mostly those are either budget reductions, or you would control this by approval through expenditure. So if we're going to reduce software, simply the superintendent or his designee would not approve, would approve less expenditures for software. So that can occur in-house.
Because it falls into day-to-day operations.
That's correct. The yellow is related to some type of policy or some type of benefit that would require, or employment that would require board action. So the items in yellow would require board action. The items in green could be handled in-house in our day-to-day operations. Okay? So on that list was a reduction in software, also eliminating all food budgets for adults in the district, also reducing electricity costs. And next line is a minimum of a 5% reduction in department or school operation budgets. Line 7 was a reduction or elimination of all or most cell phones in the district. Line 8, eliminate longevity payment. line 10, reduce health insurance contribution to the state minimum. And we had some discussions on that regarding the district pays $70 more per month per employee that is enrolled in the program. And there was a question which didn't make it to my budget document yet. We're still adding questions as we determine those answers. But one of the questions was regarding health insurance enrollment. So I thought I'd show you that number right now. There was a question from the board that wanted to know how many employees were enrolled in the plans. So we have 3 different health insurance plans offered by the state, and the state controls the plans. It's a premium, classic, and basic. The employee only, so we have 383 employees that take the premium plan for themselves only. We have 240 employees that take the classic plan only. And we have 86 employees that take the basic plan, employee only. And then you'll see here there's an employee and spouse. And we have 6 that have taken the plan for spouse, employee and spouse on the premium, 14 on classic, 3 on basic. Employee and children, we have 64 on the premium, 70 on classic, 5 on the basic. And the employee and family, so they're covering themselves and their entire family. We have 15 on the premium, 20 on classic, 2 on basic.
And so the total that would be impacted is 900 and something, let's say it over in the next column.
Yes.
908.
908. And this was a question that was asked earlier in one of our board meetings, so I will get this added to the question and answer document that you're seeing today for the first time. And that's going to be a running document and a live document. So as we get additional questions and we do the analysis, we'll add it to that so that there'll be a record there of all questions and answers.
The reason for it, because what I was I asked the question, was because if we decided.
If was a fit. We'll all be
Wanted to make sure it's out there. If we decided to do the benefit part to save money, I was wanting to know how many took the other plans, and it would affect 199 when it comes to that $234.50 savings. That's what I was trying to figure out, how many of our employees would have to pay the extra $234.50.
So this is certified and classified, correct?
Yeah.
This is all employees, so licensed and classified.
Yeah.
And then this also reflects that there's some that don't take the insurance from the
Correct.
district.
Correct.
I don't know what that number is, but
Yeah, it's a lot of that.
We have
too.
about 1,250 employees, so 1,250 minus the 908 be those employees that elect no insurance, or for whatever reason they may be covered on a spouse plan through their spouse's employer.
and these are people that have to have a certain number of hours they work per week.
Yes, they have to have 20 hours, 30 hours per week to qualify for the health insurance,
the
and
health
that's a state
insurance.
rule.
Right.
For our local benefits, we require 20 hours per week, and that's controlled by us. The 30 hours per week controlled by the state for health insurance.
So basically, Mr. Brown, all those in yellow, just to reiterate and summarize, all those in yellow would require a Board of Education action. And so, and I think you've seen all those, and I just want to make sure that we're all clear, because I know there's been misinformation out there. I believe, as well as you believe, that we do not want to cut any employee benefits.
Absolutely not.
Zero.
Absolutely
So when
not.
we think about our budget priorities, we all agree we do not want to reduce, or will not reduce, let me say that, we will not reduce employee benefits.
That's correct. We will not.
Let's say that one more time. Our priority as a school board and superintendent is to not reduce any
Any
employee benefits,
benefits.
period.
From
Amen.
any employee.
From any employee, from any employee. Okay. As I'm making my priority list for the budget, we're all on the same thing. Mr. Taylor, okay, good.
But
Okay.
we said,
Just
we
wanna
said
get that out
that
there.
part from the get-go.
No
This
reduction
was-
to
No
employee
reduction.
benefits.
This was simply because we asked for every area where we could cut funds.
Absolutely, and as you mentioned, when Mr. Brown mentioned 80% of our budget roughly is made up of salary and benefits. We always talk about the salary side, but you never hardly get an opportunity to see
Talk
what
about
does it
benefits.
cost in benefits to employees. You got to marry those two things together. So you have that information. So
And-
Brian, I
and-
think we can.
And the reason these items are on the list is because they are not required by the state of Arkansas. We are required to contribute a minimum amount to employee health insurance for employees that elect health insurance through the school district. But we are not required by the state to provide dental insurance for employees only. And when I say district provided, I mean the district pays for the employee-only dental. We pay for the employee-only vision. We pay $70 above the state minimum for the health insurance. The district pays for a $25,000 life insurance policy on every active employee. The district pays for a hospital indemnity plan that employees that provide employees a cash benefit should they be admitted to the hospital for a stay. So we are paying, these are benefits the district pays that are not required. So I was asked, how can we reduce benefits? And this is one of the ways. You can eliminate benefits that are not required by the state. However, our desire and our priority is not
It's
to
not
cut.
to touch.
I was
Correct.
just asked to provide this data to you as the board, because ultimately it's your decision.
Correct.
And again, so these items,
I know.
health,
Say it,
the
Mr. McLean. Say it.
Woo!
the health insurance contribution, the hospital indemnity, I just alluded to, dental, vision, life insurance. Those are all the policy, the insurance that the district provides that is not required by the state,
Thank you.
okay?
But let me say this real quick. We as a board, I mean, we have, 2 retired educators that sit up here. So any changes that it relates to benefits will definitely affect them. And I know for a fact we don't want that. I mean, my mom is like you met my mom before. She's a 50-year retired educator. And I would know what her reduction in benefits would mean to her. So benefits is definitely off the table. Let me say that one more time. We just wanted information
Yes, you are.
as it relates to what all of these scenarios would look like. But thank you for putting that out there.
Yes. Okay, and then line 15, we were looking at canceling all cable TV subscriptions in the district. That was an option. That's not required. And in this day and time, you can get online
Streaming.
feeds if they're needed.
Or I'll put you in touch with my Fire Stick guy.
Eliminate hotspots for employees. The hotspots are cellular internet devices. And it is not a phone, it's a cellular provided internet service.
Be nice, Natalie.
Now, some of those we're going to need to keep
Yeah, I mean, the whole
because we need internet in
So-
order for our digital currency to work.
So right, so it's not that we're not going to have some, but we have some employees that have a school-issued cell phone that has a mobile hotspot on it, and then they're also given a hockey puck, Wi-Fi. There's no reason why they need two.
Okay.
And so we are going to have a few finance. So we're just trying to be more effective and efficient with the resources that we have, and we can still accomplish the same thing without an added device.
There are some areas that we have to. So, for instance, payroll has to have a backup in case
Right.
something happens. We have to be able to run certain processes. So those won't go anywhere. But we have many that get hugely underutilized that are called floaters that never float out of people's offices. And so we're going to take a good hard look at that with the cell phones and landlines. I've been here for about 60 days now, and I have a landline and a cell phone. My landline is rung once. Do I need one? Well, in a quick 60 days, I can tell you no. So all of that is being looked at, and the cost-benefit analysis is happening right now.
So speaking to the cost-benefit analysis, and Dr. Paluski and Colonel, let me just say something real quick. As far as like with cell phone plans, like since you all are looking at the actual cell phone plans, I do know that some plans, we're talking about the added money as far as like a feature or amenity as far as a hotspot feature that's on your phone, like paying for that, right?
No, that's included. So our cell phones have they call it mobile tethering, where you can tether and it serves as its own Wi-Fi hotspot that you can jump off of. We're already paying for that.
That's what I'm
in the cell
talking about,
phone
yeah.
plan, and it doesn't make any sense. Now we're paying that they have two devices that do the exact same thing.
Because I was doing my own cost analysis after I moved said son off my cell phone plan that I didn't even know that I was paying for this hotspot thing. And, you know, I was like, I didn't even know that I was spending money on that. So
Sure.
that's kind of what I was looking at as far as some of the features or amenities that we may have on plans that people may be not using
That's
or
right. That we can reduce.
right,
That's
that you can reduce. Okay.
That's exactly. Yeah,
Okay.
let's just keep it moving so we can get into
So
the
we
next
got,
buckets.
additionally on the list was reducing paper costs, which I think is always possible in the school business. Reducing or eliminating temporary staffing. We're using some staffing agencies for filling jobs where we have vacancies. Reduction in curriculum department budget. We currently have $900,000 in the curriculum budget. That could be reduced. So that's an option that we could handle internally. Reduce the amount of work being done for additional pay. And again, that'll have to go back to supervisors. You know, sometimes additional pay is unavoidable, especially if we get a grant, and a grant pays for after-school tutoring, and you have teachers turning in timesheets for after-school tutoring. That's something that wouldn't help our bottom line in savings because we have a grant that pays for that. So that's an additional pay that's just what I consider unavoidable. It's paid for, and it serves a purpose for the kids. But there are other departments where we could reduce the amount of work that's being done beyond the workday that's not paid for by grants. That's what this item alludes to.
I do have one question, I apologize.
Yes.
At the bottom where it says eliminate tuition and reimbursement, and it says 50,000, is that 50,000 per person? Is that 50,000 altogether?
For
So
the
whoever files
it's for the district. It's
paperwork
almost
first?
on a first come, first served basis
Very
until
good.
the money runs out. So whoever's applying for that reimbursement, once we get to that number, there's no more.
Very good, thank you.
We have a district policy that says that we will invest tuition reimbursement funds from operating equal to the beginning teacher salary. So it's tied to our salary schedule. That's what the policy says. So to eliminate that, that's in yellow. So that'd be a policy change. You'd have to eliminate the policy that just eliminates reimbursement and ties it to the teacher salary schedule.
Thank you for clarifying.
Yes. Okay.
Okay. So that net savings there, Brian, you want to hit that, and then we'll move on to the next piece? So bearing in mind that nobody wants to touch, we all agree we're not touching benefits. So the number there is 1,416,114
Oh, yes.
and 12 cents.
Yeah, so if I scroll down, the green total is $1.4 million. The yellow total would be 1.2 million for a total on this page of 2.7 million.
But because we're not touching benefits, we're only saving 1.4.
Correct.
Gotcha.
Okay, so that was bucket one. We've covered that. Bucket two, I was asked to do some calculations regarding reduction of contracts. So I'm trying to get this on the screen here. So I was asked to calculate what the cost would, what the savings would be if we reduced all 245-day employees by 5 days. So this would include everybody. Yes, click on tab. Oh, you don't have tab 2. Hold on. That's an old picture. She's grown up now. Let me see.
I don't have it. It's not in here.
Okay, hold on.
Did you get
Hold
the
on.
link from your
Go
email?
back. Go back to your email.
Right there.
Go to your email.
So you do
Here,
that.
right here.
okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I have got everyone up. Right here.
Yeah.
Okay. Hold on. Open this one. Open that one. Open this one. Girlfriend, close this.
Okay, close that one.
Close that one for me. Come here. It's going to be,
Right, but remember,
Nope.
when you say
open this entire,
yes, that includes executive.
right here.
That also includes custodians or
Scroll down.
Oh,
See
they-
bucket 2 right
I
there.
got busted.
So when you say everybody,
Show me the find the buckets, baby. I got buckets.
but I don't think we want to take.
Thank you. Angela has the buckets.
But we can discuss.
Sometimes it pays to be the youngest.
Watch your mouth, pump your brakes, 10 speed.
All right, Mr. B, where are we?
Okay, so we're in bucket 2.
Yep.
And we calculated reducing all employees that were 245 days or greater by 5 days.
So, Mr. Brown, a point of clarity. So when we say 245, that's, yes, they're us at executive level at 245, but we have some other employees in other units, such as custodians that are at 245 and maintenance workers that are at 245
Yes, or more.
or more.
Yes.
Correct.
So we could divide this out and say classified that have 245 days and not touch certified and not touch classified. Can you do that?
That would certainly be my recommendation, is if you're going to reduce somebody's contract, I would not recommend reducing,
We need custodians during the summer.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
right, which make a different, their salary's a little bit different than those at the executive level. I just don't think that would be fair to them to
I agree.
reduce their contracts. But that's not what that number is.
Right.
Correct, Mr. Brown? That includes anybody that's got a 245-day contract,
Regardless.
executive team, regardless of whatever their position is.
Got you. So it would, if we took out custodians and maintenance whom have to be here, it's less than the 170,000.
Oh, definitely. I don't know what that number would be, but yes. I would guess maybe 120,000 would be a guess. Maybe 100,000. I mean, we'll calculate it out for you. But I do want to ask that question to make sure that we're all clear and all clear for the public.
Say it again.
Right, so to get this number, but what I believe that the board, as well as that we're on the same page, that there are other employees in our school district beyond the executive team, for an example, that have a 245-day contract, such as custodians and some of our maintenance workers. When we calculate this, we want to take them out of it. We don't want to reduce any of their days, is I guess what I'm getting us all on the same page for. Are we all in agreement of those on the classified side that have a 245-day contract? We do not want to reduce any of their days
I'm in agreement
by
with
1 or
that.
5 or whatever.
I agree.
Okay. I mean, just to get some clarity that when we go back and calculate that. Okay, Mr. Taylor?
Sir?
You're on that page too?
Yes,
Okay.
I do have a question. This is just for 245 contracts, right? Is that the only number we should be looking at?
If you'll go down one more line, it'll say reduce all contracts, but the 245 is what we're gonna start with.
Okay. I can't see that.
It's in your email.
Okay, I got it.
You need it?
No, ma'am.
Okay, so the next line talks about reducing all contracts for people that are greater than 195 days. So this one was greater than or equal to 245. This next line was greater than 195. So what this essentially does is avoid reducing teacher contracts that are 190, and anyone that's on an extended contract beyond 195. We actually have some teachers that are 195, but this would be greater than 195. This calculation is $560,000 if you reduce.
What would determine the different amount? What would determine the different amount of days as far as the contracts?
Well, and those are, so we have a question involving that over here in this question and answer document.
And while you're looking for that, Mr. Brown, what line item number 5 is saying is that any contract among 195, that means from 195 to 245, whoever is in those buckets of those contracts, if those were all reduced by 5, that's what that $500,000.
That's correct.
Got it. Everybody with me on that? Okay.
However, 245 is not the maximum contract. 245, we actually have 254, and we have some.
Say what?
We have some 254-day employees that are grandfathered in to holiday pay.
Oh.
So prior to, in 2015, when the board approved a savings plan in 2015, they eliminated holiday pay. So there were 245-day employees that were paid for 9 holidays. The board stopped that practice going forward, but they allowed people who were grandfathered in to keep them. And we have employees that are still employed that continue to carry those.
Negative.
So, but I want to answer this question first. So you were asking what determines the length of contracts. Well, our policy does. And in our question and answer document here on page 8, you will see the policy that talks about length of contracts. And these are for licensed people. This is the licensed contract side. I don't have the classified, but this is a list. So these are 245, 240, and you'll see what, whether it's principals, assistant principals, JROT instructors, JAG instructors.
What page is that on,
So-
Mr. Brown?
Page 8.
So with that being said, could we not the ones that are grandfathered, could we not go back and amend those?
Yes.
Yeah, of course you can.
That's this next line here.
Oh, see, I'm jumping ahead of myself, cause I'm
That's this
ready
line.
to start.
Yes, remember that would be an employee benefit, but yes, anything in yellow, you have the provision to change as a board. It required a policy change, but that is well within your purview to change.
So that's the next line, eliminate holiday pay. There are 27 employees who are still grandfathered in to the holiday pay. So they're not on a 245-day contract, they're on a 254 because they receive pay for 9 holidays. That would be a
So,
$43,200 savings.
so would they go back to a 245 day? Okay, okay.
Yes, so they, if you were to approve elimination of holiday pay, their 254-day contract would be changed to 245.
And then,
Can I go back to the line above that?
then they feasibly could be taking 2 hits.
I was about
That was
to
my
say.
next question.
Yeah,
That's right. That would-
because they would fall into the category of the ones that are on 245.
They
Yep.
can go to 240.
And then
So
they're
it
going
could
to
go
reduce
to
They're already
240.
in- They're already included because you'll see I have greater than or equal to 245. So
Okay.
that first line, the reduction of 5 days would
Includes.
include the 254-day people. But if you were to do both the first and the second, that would be 2 different applications of it, yes.
Are the ones that have the 254, is that certified? We have some in certified and some in classified?
I believe I'll have to confirm that. I believe they're all classified.
Yeah, that would have been my guess too.
All classified?
'Cause those would have been the only ones impacted by the holiday pay.
I believe they're all classified employees.
So in a nutshell, instead of 254, they're going to 240 if we approved both
Both.
categories.
That's correct.
Or you can just have it as one big hit versus 2 small hits.
Okay, and then the final line on here is elimination of the $1,500 annual bonus we pay to special ed teachers. The board approved that policy, but there's a provision in there that if funding is not sufficient, we don't pay that. So the board has already authorized by policy that to be eliminated if the funding is not sufficient. And of course, that the original plan for that was to pay these bonuses out of RMAC funds. But RMAC funds are not sufficient anymore, and this bonus has been paid out of operating the last several years. So this is one of the items, given the policy says we could give notice that starting next year we will not pay this bonus, and that is allowed by policy.
So for clarification, hang on. The SPED teacher bonus, if I remember correctly, and I'm going back from history, was given as an incentive because we needed more SPED teachers,
100%.
correct?
It was
Yes.
recruitment.
It was recruitment. If you remember last year, going into the school year, going into that March, we were a little concerned because I think it was close to 20 special education teachers that we would need. We filled that within one individual before the school started. That's pretty good. But that helped us be able to retain and attract those teachers in such a high needs area that has a shortage already. And again, that's a benefit to those individuals that are working in that field.
Okay,
I would look at that as a benefit.
correct. So again, for clarification and understanding, those SPED teachers went and received a certification in order to become SPED, correct? So did they get tuition reimbursement if they applied for it in order for them to do that?
I mean,
If they
made
applied.
application
And if the
they
funding
were
was
in the
there.
First come,
Yeah.
first serve,
Mhm.
they were eligible just like all other employees.
Because-
So, but some of them, I mean, some of them came out of, some of them have been licensed special ed teachers and came out of college with that. So
Sure.
they wouldn't have qualified for that. But if they added certification while they were employed and, they were eligible for that just like other employees.
Sure. So my follow-up question is that we have been paying our teachers, our SPED teachers, this bonus of $1,500 for every year for the last 3 or 4 years, correct? Okay, just wanted to clarify.
I'm going back to this 254 and this holiday pay. So what you threw out a year, what year was that?
2015,
Okay, I wrote 12, 2015, okay.
the board, I believe it was 15. It was either 14 or 15. I believe it was 15. The board changed the policy that eliminated holiday pay, but they allowed those that were hired that had it to keep it. They just changed it going forward. So new hires from 2015 forward were not hired with holiday pay as an option.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Follow-up from Angela. Angela, thank you for that. So we're talking about the 245, the holiday pay, the 245. Does
254?
that encompass, 254, does that encompass the longevity payment? Or are those two separate things? Because you spoke about a
They're
longevity
different.
payment.
Two
So these are two separate instances that we are paying veterans within our establishment, our work family. Okay.
I'd like to go to the reduce all contracts greater than 195 by 5 days. I noticed that the principals have elementary principals have the 220. Don't our elementary principals govern over summer school if they're in their buildings?
They get paid for that. They're on their contract. Usually, elementary is the only one that's not a 245. They usually work till about the end of June, and then their contract, they come back on contract about the middle of July. So if they choose to run summer school, then they elect to do that. They receive a stipend for that because they're off contract, if you will. Many times we have a up-and-coming leader that's getting leader experience that ends up running that, but we've had a couple cases where some principals have been the lead administrator over summer.
Okay.
So
Thank
just because it's at their school, for example, that means that they are not necessarily the principal of that summer school. They can opt to do it or opt not to do it, correct?
They do. They have the choice. Most that are principals that run summer school want to run it in their own building
Right.
and not in somebody else's building. But in the event that they don't want to do it, sometimes we see that's a good leadership opportunity for an assistant principal, an MCO, a literacy coach. We just require that they have an admin one or they're working towards it. So they've got, it's a good training tool
Okay.
for them, for sure.
So who did you say paid for that while they're doing that?
In the summer? So we have dedicated, so prior to my arrival, we've not had a summer school in North Little Rock. What we were able to do was use ESSER funds that have gone away, unless it was here at one time. It was?
Yeah.
And so was it, did individuals have to pay for it? No. It was free through Title I? Okay, gotcha. Well, see what I learned. But at least prior to 2020, we hadn't ran it for a while, I don't think. Because when I came, there was no summer school structure. Regardless, we were able to use ESSER funds and able to run summer school the last 3 years to address students that had significant learning loss. This year, we're planning to target secondary for credit recovery, kids to recoup credits in order to be on track to graduate. And I'll share that graduation data that I'm very concerned about next week when I present the plan. But this year, the target will be third grade because the law, the Right to Read Act, requires that if a child is below proficiency, and we have many students that are below proficient, they either have to go to summer school or get a waiver in order to go to fourth grade, or they would be retained. So that's our target. Oh, that's the other thing I want to add to elementary schools. So when the month they're not there, their secretaries are 245 as well. So no one's on campus. So we've dealt with this when parents want to go visit a school and they want to come and talk to their principal, they're not there. So just keep that in mind between the months of the middle of June till the middle of July. Am I right, Mr. Brown? I mean, secretaries, all that front office, school's kind of closed, so to speak.
So it is, so the elementary campuses are closed. Some of the secondary campuses are open because those principals in the front office have 2 45-day contracts.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
So I guess a question out of this bucket. I'm sorry, Ms. Temple?
I said, do they need to be? I can't imagine they'd have that much traffic in the summer. I mean, in the high school, I could see them maybe working to do schedules and stuff, but I can't
I mean,
imagine why elementary schools would need to be open.
I would say that's something maybe possibly we can streamline to our student services area, and we can make an appointment for the principal or secretary to meet them on a particular day, maybe once or twice during the month. Just know, hey, this is what we're doing. But that's something obviously we could and can discuss, because that just gives the community members who have moved into the neighborhood, who are going to sign their children up, who believe in the North Little Rock School District and want to participate with us, give them an opportunity to see what's in their backyard.
And I think that's what when I've talked to parents that seemed a little frustrated when they're trying to get to a school, but they can't go talk to their principal before they make a decision. So they have to go to the student center office, student-centered support services to register and all that. I think when you get to meet the principal of the school that your child wants to go, that's a personalization, because it's a choice to send your child anywhere, and you want to know the person that's going to lead the building in order to do that. I will say it's the only school district I've ever been in which elementary principals were not 12-month employees or a 245-day contract. And I don't know the history behind that, but it is what it is. But I guess out of this bucket, if we could discuss, what is it here in bucket number 2 that you all would like to see or not see put on as a priority of cost savings?
I'm for the 245 days to cut 5 days, except for custodians and maintenance. Those people, they need to be there to clean the building while the 245-day people are not there.
I agree.
And I piggyback that, because in the event that maintenance needs to do something and students do not need to be in the building, there are safety hazards that we need to concern.
Sure, they're
concerned
considered
with.
essential staff. So,
Yes.
I'll give you the biggest reminder, which is the winter storm.
Yes.
When they're essential personnel, they were coming in to shovel and all those
Yes.
other things.
Yes.
Is that the will of the board? You want us to look at reduction of all 245-day contracts with the exception of custodians, maintenance? Mr. Brown, help me. I'm not sure. On this list where it says 245 days,
Could it just be classified?
yes, we could just look at that. That's probably the best way to say it, Ms. McLean. Reduce all 245 contracts excluding classified staff.
Well, so, I mean, I'm classified. So, I mean, by that definition, I would be excluded. So I think we probably need to tailor that down
Okay.
Yeah,
to make sure that
that's the
we're
reason why I
targeting-
specifically said
I think we got to look at the groups of employees
Yeah.
that are in that category. 'Cause
Right.
the only thing that you got
Yes.
listed on this is Army instructors, secondary principals, executive directors, coordinators, dyslexia specialists, career academy coach, head counselor. That's all 245.
because we
That's
have
on the
Coaches are at
license side.
240.
That's all on the license. side.
Correct. So we'll have to child nutrition, sure.
Security, that kind of stuff that we still have to have.
We will, we'll look at those, and then
Okay.
we'll bring some specified language back that hopefully will
So-
target the group that you're interested in.
Correct. But just keep in mind, that number is going to be less than 170,000. Just
We
so you know.
understand.
I know when we
We
try to get to
understand.
millions of
It's-
dollars, it's,
it's not going to get us to $1 million,
Right.
but any savings.
Okay. so you want us to look at, that would be line 5, and that would be a board action because that would be reduction of I'm sorry,
Of country.
line 4, thank you. Line 4.
Also, line 7.
Holiday pay. Okay. Now remember, I guess we got to have a discussion about that because that is an employee benefit. And when we said we're not going to reduce employee benefit, so
So
only
when we-
to that.
So with
That's all
the,
classified.
with the exception, when we say do not touch the benefits, in my mind, I'm thinking insurance benefits. So holiday pay, and I understand it's $43,000, but if we add that to the 170 roughly,
But
now
remember,
we're-
that won't be 170. It'll be, but
so
whatever those two
140
numbers are
and
going to be.
43, there's 180. So there's 180 towards the 5.1 we're attempting to find. So in full disclosure and meeting in the middle, holiday pay is something that we need to discuss to possibly eliminate.
Ma'am, a recommendation, and having been down this road before in other industries, a good way of looking at it is not so much as a benefit as opposed to,
Can you, yeah, there we
sorry, not as a benefit, but does a condition still exist that caused that benefit to come to fruition in the first place?
Mhm.
If the environment doesn't exist anymore, do you still need to keep paying the bill, yes or no?
Okay. So, to clarify, our marching orders are to look at line 4, which will require a board action of reduction of all contracts greater or equal to 245 days by 5 days, which includes executive team, but we will have to look at the employee group, and it's the will of the board not to reduce that in any classified, well, I can't say that. Brian's classified.
It's not classified.
So
Some classified, some,
Specific
be some
areas.
licensed, some classified. How about that?
Yes, specifically the maintenance and custodians, which would include security. So out of those
Yeah, well-
3 right there,
well,
those are the ones.
We will, and in this ongoing question and air thing, we will put that in there. We'll break that down so you will be able to see it, and then we'll come up with that number.
Just beware, though, a decent chunk of the holiday pay are maintenance.
I understand,
So, no, I'm just clarifying that,
Yep.
so.
I understand.
And I believe some custodial staff.
Small.
Yes.
Much smaller than
But you
maintenance.
do have that down there as far as the 254, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. Let me holiday by. That's
What about
Okay.
line 5? We haven't discussed
Well,
it.
for clarification, on the eliminate the holiday pay, if they're at 254, does that take them down to 245? I mean, is that, it takes them down to 245, so they'd be
Wouldn't they be down to
the same as every
Wouldn't
other?
they be down to 240?
That's correct. They would be the
Two.
same as others, and then if they were in the maintenance or custodial category, they would not have that, the 5-day reduction.
Okay, so if it took them down to 240, they'd go to 245 if they were in that, okay, all
Yes,
right,
ma'am.
just wanted to.
So they would be at 245, yes.
So
Instead-
it would
Hang on.
still just,
Instead of being at 254,
Right.
they're, if we take that away, it drops them to 245. But
If
I'm a
they're on the
custodian.
classified.
But I'm a custodian or I'm maintenance, and we've already said we didn't want to take those days away from them.
Sure.
So they're only being,
Okay.
the
got you.
deduction would be that one,
Okay.
because they're going from 254 to 245.
Okay.
But we're not taking more days because we want maintenance and custodians and security to keep their 245
Okay.
if need be.
if need be.
But then it'll be I'm sorry. It'll be looked at and adjusted if it's deemed that they didn't need those particular days, then it'll look, it'll be down to the 195. Gotcha, I'm on it.
Okay.
Okay, I've still got to say this so
195.
I can get clear.
It'd be less.
Line 4 says
Hold on. Ms.
reduce
McLean-
by
Ms.
5.
McLean's got the floor. Go ahead.
Reduced by 5 days, but then we are going to exempt, and they're at 254, right?
You
They're at
mean some of the maintenance or custodians, I think, that are in the category of 254 that got grandfathered in with the elimination or the holiday pay.
they're not gonna have 5 days taken away, so they're staying at 254.
No, they're gonna go down to 245.
Eliminate the holiday pay,
They're gonna go down to,
245.
245.
Right, which then will put them
The
equal.
holiday,
You're
the
at-
holiday pay
You
is
working,
paid.
you're a custodian for the school, and you're getting 254 right now.
right.
We're proposing to drop you to 245.
I thought in the notes,
Hold on. We're gonna drop you to 245.
okay,
Now, the 245 people, we want to take 5 days away, but custodians, which would be you, and maintenance and security, and they're going to give us the list. So that would be it. You would be at 245.
so there would be no 254 custodians or
Correct.
maintenance.
Correct.
And there would be 245, and they would more likely be at 245, the maintenance and custodial. They would, if this goes forward, they would be the only one at 245. The rest of us would be at 240 at an executive level or licensed in that category, classified.
Okay,
We'll
for some reason I
get-
had in my head they were
We
gonna
got
stay
it.
at
We
254.
got it. We know what to
so-
put together so you can see it and it's clear about which job category would be impacted or affected. And so, okay, and then we got that straightened out. I'm clear about that. Now, what about the elimination of the special ed teacher bonus? Is that something that?
Oh, we didn't say
before we go
anything
in.
about, I'm sorry. We didn't say anything about line 5, if we're reducing.
Reduce all contracts? Then
I'm,
that
I'm
would-
just saying we didn't.
Yeah,
Okay,
go ahead.
195. Where am
Yep.
I on 195s? So who are my 195s?
No greater.
All
than.
contracts.
Right, so now
Greater
you're
than.
talking band,
Media
workforce education
specialist.
personnel, paraleadership, activity director, yearbook sponsor, cheerleader, drill team sponsor, assistant coaches for football, basketball, volleyball, TV program instructor, band, media specialist, assistant principals, JAG coordinator, counselor 6 through 12, junior ROTC,
Thank you.
elementary principals, coordinator school health, head counselors for the COE, VBI instructor, not sure what VBI is, head volleyball coach, head football coach, head basketball coach, head counselor, career academy, dyslexia coordinators, directors, executive directors, secondary principals, and senior Army instructor.
So yes, it does need to be evaluated. Yes, we need to look at that. We're looking at all aspects. So yes, it needs to be considered. With my caveat to that, there are going to be times when we need to look at that contract and get into the details. If I have a football coach that needs to be at, say, 190, he or she may need to work 2 weeks before school for a football camp or a week after the end of school to put away all equipment. And I'm using that as a basic example. I'm not looking to get into the details today, but those are the things that we need to consider. Same way with band. Off contract or on contract, they have band camp for 1 week. So we need to consider these things. And just for the record and the public to know, the senior Army instructor, JROTC instructor, is that one and the same? Or are those two separate? That's one and the same.
Yeah, it's one and the same.
So, okay, thank you for the
But you have a
clarification.
senior one that.
And then we
is-
usually have an assistant, I understand that. But some of that salary is not paid, or some of that salary is paid by who? Because
Well,
it's not all of it,
That's
all
exactly.
of us.
It's a 50-50 split between the school district and the federal government or the Army in this case.
Correct.
So we don't pay their entire.
Thank you for
salary.
saying that.
Yes, ma'am.
Because that also comes
That's-
into play when
that's
it
very
comes
unique.
to money.
It's very unique to that
Thank you.
position.
JAG instructor, is that played a part in that too, as it relates
Yes.
to, that's part of the?
It's on the list?
Right, what I'm asking is that part of the military paying part of that
No.
too? That's something totally different?
Yeah, it's workforce development.
Well, see, I'm thinking JAG, you know.
Right, you're thinking,
Advocate General.
That's what I was thinking of,
Yeah.
okay.
That's why we need
you're thinking legal counsel.
So can I clarify?
Yeah.
Are we basically saying we want to look at all contracts to see if we can reduce them by 5 days?
Yes.
With the exceptions of the ones that we've already said we don't want to look at, like custodians and maintenance and security.
So what I'm hearing is it's anything over 195 is you want us to slice that and dice that into.
Just
I
look
would
at-
say to evaluate, yes. And it's not that we're removing maintenance, security, and custodians. We just need to think outside of the box to ensure that when we're having a benefit game on a Saturday, that we are involved with the community and the school district is hosting it with our facilities. We need our staff members to be available in order to clean, prepare, and secure. So that is what I'm stating by that comment.
And Mr. Brown, remind me, just as a quick example, to just kind of break this down to make it personal to what it might impact an employee. So for an example, let me take, what do we say, greater than, media specialist. They're at 200 days. They would be impacted by less. So what's that look like to a media specialist if their contract is reduced by 5 days? What fiscal impact would that have on that employee?
That's what we
5
want.
divided by 200 would be a 2.5% decrease in their salary.
So here we are at a time of, not giving salaries, but I
Not
just think
giving
we got,
raises.
and we're not giving raises, but they're gonna be, that's less in their paycheck in that they're gonna be fiscally impacted.
Can we just start with, this is just me. Can we just start with line 4
The 245, do all that,
and 7?
line, okay. Yeah, sure.
Can we start?
Is that the will of the entire
We
board?
need a starting point. And next
line
year or whenever, we may have to go back to line 5 and visit it as well. But we need a starting point.
Okay.
Yes.
So if we can just start with 4 and
Agreed.
7.
I agree.
What I would like to see is maybe each of these in those other categories, the days category, some sort of discussion on what is the, let's say, minimum number of days they need. Like you say, if we're going to have a camp in the summer, well, we've got these days. So that you can see that those days are needed and you want to support that. We would want to support that. So maybe we could start having that discussion, or these folks start having that discussion about that. Because I know in the past there was a committee that you would go to. For example, media specialists weren't at 200 days, they were at 192, and you go to the committee with your reasoning on why you need these days. And
That
then the
has to happen.
committee would decide
Yeah.
whether they were going to do that or not. That was done in the past. I don't know if that's still done at all, or if there's even a committee for that anymore. But
But, the bottom line is just know that in that line item, that will fiscally impact, these are all
Quite a few.
licensed individuals, so they will have a reduction in their overall salary. And the side to that, remember, that's the work that Ms. Stumpenhouse done, all that great work on stipends that we haven't forgot about and we want to do, and we want to be able to fund those. I think she said the other night, we're 30 years that we haven't, 25, 30 years that we haven't touched stipends. So I'm just concerned that we're going to reduce a teacher, a licensed person's fiscal at a time that we're not giving raises, and
true.
I'm just concerned about that, but that is.
No, that's the reason why I said.
Yeah, we'll start with
if
the
we
two.
can-
We'll start with-
4 and 7.
Yep.
But we still need to continue the conversation
Sure.
I
So
like that, Dr.
of the
Redis.
other.
Yes.
we'll look at
agree.
the 245 that you asked us to, and the elimination of holiday pay, and then what I'm hearing is there's not an appetite to touch the special ed bonuses at this time.
Correct.
Okay. Look at.
No,
Wait,
no, no, no,
Wait, time out.
no.
No,
Time out.
no.
No,
We
I
didn't
wanna-
say that.
yeah.
Oh, you
No,
want us
I
to
want
touch?
to circle back on that. If it's still a need to pay them to keep them here, maybe we adjust how much we pay. Maybe we come down a little bit on that. But if we need a bonus to attract them, I think we should discuss that.
So think about that as that's retention. Remember when the COVID, we had that, we funded that through retention in a high need area. I mean, quite frankly, when we have high need areas in math and English language arts, it would be nice to do that too. But there's a compliance issue there in the federal law as it relates to special ed that
Yes.
is probably another reason why we should keep that intact. But
Yes,
what-
there are.
So let me get the clarity on what would you like us to do with that line item? Leave it alone, reduce it to 1,000, 800, 500? Do I hear 75?
Well, can we consider
trying to give
changing
them
it
something.
can we consider changing it to 1,000?
We can consider
like the
anything.
1,000.
But here's my caveat to that. Just know that we pay less in salary than our neighbors. We have better fringe benefits, and that additional $1,500 for a SPED educator who is a part of our team who is highly needed. And yes, I understand we need math and literacy. I'm not causing division. I'm not choosing 7 over everyone else. But with that being said, I need, personally, Natalie Wonkum needs those SPED teachers to receive a bonus. Now, if we want to discuss 1,500 or 1,000, 1,200, 1,300, whatever, but when we look and compare to other districts, we are already $7,000 to $10,000 less on a salary, and we have teachers driving to Conway making more money, and Little Rock is about to take a cut, and they're cutting 300 employees. I really would like to keep that as at least one incentive for North Little Rock.
I do remember on the survey that was sent out about budget cuts, there were several people that said, don't do anything to special ed, and if anything, increase. I saw that several times on that survey from teachers. So,
And so
That and it keeps
remind
us
me
out
one
of.
more time. We have. Let me go back to my notes here. Hold on a second. 12. What as far as employees?
12?
1,250 employees.
Yeah, we say around 1,300.
Okay, so and then I think what I heard last night was 179 as far as the responses, and so
Responses to,
to the surveys
Oh.
that was sent out. Okay.
okay, so let me go back.
I
What
was just
direction do you
gonna-
want me to take on the eliminate?
I think hold off on the SPED. I mean, because to me, I look at it. I'm sorry, Rochelle. For me, I guess I look at it because since that's federal, that's getting into some federal, and you have to have somebody that knows how to do that paperwork and that knowledge of that. But my vote would be to do the 4 and 7 for right now.
Boss?
That's what I was about to say.
Okay.
If we could just focus on 4 and 7,
Okay.
because
Is that the will of the
SPED
board?
keeps us out of legalities.
Sure, is that the will of the
And
I agree with the two ladies.
Okay. Mr. Taylor, you on board with that?
Yes, I am.
Okay. So we'll go back to, cross that off our list. We're back to line 4 and 7 on bucket 2, that's what you want us to
focus on.
focus on, and then
Yes.
come up with that dollar amount.
Yes.
Just knowing in those two categories, even,
It's not getting us anywhere close to what we need, but it can be a
Yes.
part of.
absolutely. It's part of every.
Because the
every
real
penny counts.
goal is to get to 9 million.
Okay. Got it. Got it. Y'all need a break? Just keep
Yes.
plugging? You need a break?
Need a break.
5-minute break?
Yes.
5 minutes.
5 minutes. There we go.
Our break is over. We are back online.
Thank you for my gum.
Okay. Looks like we got our marching orders on bucket 2. Mr. Brown, bucket 3.
Oh, bucket 3.
Find your bucket 3.
I found my bucket.
Find your bucket 3,
I found bucket 3.
Looking at you, sister. You found your bucket
Yep,
3?
I got my bucket 3. I'm in my bucket.
I used to be the youngest.
Okay. So these were some items that my office received to calculate costs on. The first line there, early morning and lunch aids. We are spending 140, it's a little bit over, but it's $140,000 we're spending on that expense. Next line, Dean of Students. Those are not required positions.
Go ahead,
Question.
Brian, I think it's a question.
Question, you have Emmy in the corner. It's not color coordinated, so what does that mean? Are these board?
So I haven't color coordinated. Yes, these would be board actions. I just haven't
Okay.
color coordinated these.
Okay.
I'll try to do them as we.
So, right, so what we're talking about in bucket number 1, Brian, that would be eliminating those early morning and lunch aids, is what this is.
Mhm.
Now, again, this,
No,
this
no, it's line 3, not bucket 1.
sorry, we're in bucket
Bucket
3.
We in bucket 3.
Line 3. But again, this directly touches a school and
So-
directly touches
So
a campus.
everything in bucket 3 that we're about to talk about, that's board approval items.
Yes, I'm coloring. them.
Okay.
And it's things
Okay.
that touch the actual
Schools
school and
and the
students.
students.
And
Now,
the
this
students.
involves employment, so it
Okay.
would involve the board.
Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Also, with that caveat is that what Colonel's doing is we're doing an analysis of lunch schedules, lunch aids, crossing guards. We're analyzing that right now to look. But if you eliminated this line, you're eliminating those positions that
Gotcha.
are at the school.
Okay, while we're paused, I apologize. So, in my mind, hypothetically, if the will of the board says we're going to look at this and do whatever action we need to do with this, it is a possibility of, instead of teachers handling this situation, these items here, this early morning and lunch aids covering the teacher rotations, that we will have to depend on volunteers more so than having our teachers do their job.
Right. So this, in
Just
my
for
opinion,
clarification.
would probably put some strain on our teachers. Right now, this is a support. Yes, it would depend on the number of volunteers at a school to be able to do that, but it would touch the school function. And I would just cautious us anytime that we can try to stay away from the school as much as possible. Classroom is what we protect, number 1. And quite frankly, this needs to be studied, but it will impact the school if you decide to cut that.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
How did we have this huge increase each year, like from 2022 to
Yes.
2030?
I don't know the answer to that.
Well,
Be a Mr. Brown question.
early morning and lunch aids were eliminated in the 2015 savings plan by the board, and those have gradually been added back.
Okay.
Do we know why they were eliminated? Was it?
Savings. So if
But-
you recall, back in 2015, between 2013 and 15, the board had 2 items that caused them to have to do an operations reduction. One, the first item was that the new building construction plan went through. The board agreed. The board told the public, if you'll approve this millage, we're not asking for a millage to cover the whole cost of our bonded debt payment. We're going to ask you for a millage that will cover a portion of it, and then we are going to initiate $8 million in operational savings to cover $8 million of that bonded debt payment. So the board didn't ask for the total millage to cover the cost of the bonded debt, because at that point in time, it would have made North Little Rock the highest millage in the state, and they didn't want that label. So they chose a millage that was lower, and they said, we're going to reduce our operational expenses and help cover that. And that, in turn, caused reduction in staff. It also closed some schools at that point. So there was an $8 million reduction. There was also, if you recall, we were in desegregation court at that time. We were under desegregation court order, and we were receiving desegregation funds, $7.6 million from the state annually. So we were removed from court supervision on that, and the state discontinued the deseg funding to the district. So there was $8 million in operational savings for the construction program that was needed. There was $7.6 million that was needed for the deseg funding that was going away. So that's $15.6 million that the district had to come up with. So where we're looking at $5 million right now, in 2013 to 15, they were looking for $15 million in cuts. And part of their cuts was the early morning and lunch aids. Those were eliminated. They were added back over time.
For clarification,
So that's what my point to you in your question earlier is once you create the room in your budget for that, you have to stick with it. Because if you add those expenses back over time, you can eliminate the good that the budget money that was available for investing in salaries. So,
Right.
so for clarification, the millage that you're referring to was the 2012 millage
that's correct.
that went through,
That's correct.
not the current millage we are attempting.
That's correct.
Just for
No.
clarifications.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. This was the first millage in 2012.
Okay, and this is a perfect example of what I'm hoping you get to work on with HR and salary schedules and all that. Positions that are numbered, and we have approved these positions because over time, I know positions creep in, and I don't know if it's a new position, if it's a reclass position, all that stuff, and I've been saying this for years. We need to know exactly what our positions are, and they should, we should be able to say, clearly, this position exists, approved, and expected.
Ma'am, I completely agree. And I'll be honest, when I first got here, I asked that question. And it's taken me 60 days to get my head wrapped around it. And without going into really tough technical details, the big part of that issue is the way the state counts heads. Arkansas Department of Education forces schools to use a database system that is really for bean counters and not HR professionals, and the two sides of the house don't talk. So we literally had to invent a master position controlled database, which is nothing but a giant Excel spreadsheet, so we can track exactly how it flows, because the module in there for HR does not talk to the finance side of the house, and that's what Department of Ed makes us use, makes every school district use. Several school districts have done the same thing we do, which is a little bit ironic, because if you know how the state cabinet departments work, they don't even use that system. They have a system where the finance side talks to the HR side all in one system, but they make school districts use one that will not do that. And so we've
Make
had
it
to-
make sense.
So we've had to come up with that bridge strategy, and we just finished that. So it's taken about 2
So-
months to get there.
Right, so that's part of, when you get those executive team reports, you want a whole staffing list. That's what you're getting is, here's everything that's vacant that we know of in the district. We have a position control meeting every Monday morning. So schools have to, this didn't exist when I got here, but now they have a whole process in which if you have a vacancy, it's got to go through a series and level of, why did the employee leave? What's the impact if you don't have it? It's got to go through finance. Do we have the money to be able to cover it before it gets to us to approve it, and then push it out through HR that we're now hiring this position? So,
And I've already
I
lost a
digress.
few friends because I've said no. So
I'm sure.
go ahead, sir.
And can I go, one more thing, because it's pertinent to this whole thing here. We've been asking, or I have myself been asking for years to get these salary schedules worked out where admin is off of the teacher schedule. So there's a schedule for teachers, a schedule for admin, because I want to be able to give teachers a raise and not necessarily admin a raise. I mean, I want that ability, and the way it is now, if we give anybody a raise, everybody gets it. So, and I know you get, and I'm just saying this because there's people who don't understand all the things that still need to be done, and there's so much. There's a long laundry list of
yes,
stuff.
ma'am.
So,
We're also working through that. There again, over time, and like I said, I've dealt with this a couple other industries, that you will have certain people with certain qualifications, and you think it's easier based off their status to lump everybody collectively or holistically under one salary schedule and policy or whatever. But that's very difficult to do, especially when you have to have a license or something to have a job in the first place. Just by that necessity, that outside forcing function, which is law, you really have to slice it up. And once you've done that, then if you so decide, the board, so you can actually look at individual salary schedules based off those requirements that you have to have. That doesn't mean they all have to be in one big bowl. You can take that bowl and you
Right.
can have
And-
little
and-
individual compartments in it.
And they are for us, right? That's in one big bowl. If I have a license, then you got all the percentage calculations over it. It was new to me when I got here. However, to my understanding, that's kind of Arkansas practice. That's not uncommon for any district, but it is something that we'll be happy to look at.
I will say, North Little Rock has separated those salaries in the past. There was a move back around 2010 to 13, I don't know the exact time, but to merge the administrators and teachers into one schedule. They have been separate in the past, but they were merged at one point, so.
Okay.
all right.
Keep us going.
Okay. Next line, Dean of Students. That budget line is $828,000 in our current budget. Next line,
Can
assistant.
we go back to that?
Yes.
So
Jesus, help
we
me,
went
Lord.
from
Passed out.
we went from
Revive.
FY '22 to 0 to FY '23 to 21,000. Did you say 800?
And remind me, Brian, I was running through my numbers of how many positions that is. I got 8 that I know of off the top of my head. There might be a 9th in there. I know the high school, the middle school. Ridge Road. There's another one there I know that we put. And then we had the 7th Street one, but I'm not talking about that position today, but we'll move out. 8, that would be 10. I think it's made up of 10 positions, correct, Mr.?
That sounds correct.
Yeah, so
Without bringing personal information up on my computer.
yeah, I believe it's 10. I can just about categorize where every single one of those are. So there are 6 at the high school, and they're tied to each career academy. So in the 9th grade academy, and it's all part of the career academy structure. So each one of them, there's one in 9th grade, and there's one in each pathway. That's a total of 6. One of their primary roles is to support the assistant principal in discipline and coaching students, behavior with students. That's their primary role. There are 2 at the 7th and 8th grade campus, and then we've added one at Ridge Road Elementary School because it's the largest elementary school in the district, about 555 students. And if you remember, when we looked at their data in the past couple of years, they've had a huge trend spike with discipline. Now having the dean there, that has dropped. We had one at 7th Street as well. Remember when we had all the discipline issues with there? And I'm not going to get into that specific. You'll hear about that later, but you know, their numbers have decreased. That's why they're there, as more of an intervention support on the behavior side and coaching side to support. This is a school-based position that is allocated to those campuses.
So remind me again, we're looking at how many, as far as FY '24, as far as, you said 10, is that what I heard?
Yeah. Yes, I have 10. Without going through
Right.
and giving it, don't quote me on that, but I'm
Right,
I'm
approximately, we'll
pretty
just say
close.
approximately, for the
Pretty close.
public, just approximately 10.
Yes.
Okay, so with that being said, I mean, although we all visit all of the schools, we're not in them 100% of the time, so we don't know what all goes on in the school buildings. But as it relates to that component, would it be safe to say that we can maybe have some that multitask or multi-building? Is that something that is, again,
Well, there's always that.
you're
There's-
the
yeah,
educator.
Sure,
and
there's
so-
of course there's always that ability, but my concern would be we want to ensure that students like this, I'm going to say, if you're using a model that's more itinerant, I'm going to spend a couple days over here and a couple days over here. In my experience, you want to eliminate you want more contact time with students, then you want windshield time driving from one school to the next. Obviously, we're a relatively smaller community, but it does take time to go drive to that next
This is
campus and takes away from being at the campus. Coming out of COVID, you'll kind of hear this in my presentation next week. We've all seen it in the school district, the rise of disciplinary issues across our system. We've gotten better, but there's still a whole host of need that exists. And I know working with these individuals, you know, if a student is disciplined, there's a lot of consequences they have. They're on a behavior plan. That's what this individual doing. They're following up with families. If there's a child that's, you know, having a difficult time in Colonel Stanger's class, they're usually the first one that gets called, go talk to the student, how to connect with them. They're working with their assistant principal on the discipline side of it and how do they support them. The dean model's been around, you know, for a while. But again, based upon our need, I would be reluctant to remove that resource from a school because of the effectiveness that we know that they can have on, when you looked at our data as it relates to, it's going down in discipline, but I think this would be a hard blow to the campus and the principal and the support of that leadership team if we remove them. You certainly have the right to do that. That would take a board action to say we're going to eliminate, but you're eliminating those positions, and those are positions being eliminated at a school, which is what I caution us about. But that's your purview.
So again, for clarification, the dean of students is a full-time employee that is a dean of students, because in the past we have had coaches serve as dean of students. So what I'm hearing is that we no longer have coaches.
I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that.
Thank you.
I don't want to get into somebody's specific personnel, but we do. We do have some coaches that are also deans. And so that's a way of kind of molding two things with needing a resource, but it's not fully dedicated all 4 periods to that role. Most of them are. I would say with the exception of 1, 2 that I can think of.
Okay, just want to make sure.
How long is their contract? I don't see it on this list. When I mean,
190 days.
190-day contracts?
Yeah.
And it looks like they average $82,000 or $83,000?
That's with benefits.
Okay.
So can you take fringe off of that? And I don't know what percentage the fringe benefit is, just to kind of get it down to the salary.
Well, fringe includes insurance.
Right, all of those things.
Is it 20% fringe or 25 or
No,
15
it
or?
is, it's usually around 28 to 30%, depending on the salary, because it's a percentage. The fringe includes your payroll taxes, which are Social Security, Medicare tax, and then Arkansas teacher retirement match of 15%.
Okay.
So the 7.65 FICA, the two Social Security and Medicare, so 7.65, 15% from teacher retirement, 22.65 is automatically, that's required by the federal government and teacher retirement.
Okay.
So then the difference between 22.65% and 30% is the cost of the benefits. We're talking about health insurance, the dental, vision, if they've elected it. So it varies by employee salary and by their elections that they choose for insurance purposes.
I do know that over the past few years, we've had a huge conversation about behavior in our schools, at our high school, at our middle school,
Yes.
and this was done to help with that.
That's exactly right. That was
Yes.
to meet a need at the request of principals and teachers, for that matter, to support the school. And you're exactly right.
This would be something that I would want to put at the very bottom of the priority
Again,
list.
this would directly impact services at that
I know.
campus, which
Yeah.
I think we all, at least I know I am, I think we all are, is we want to protect the school as much as we
Yes.
physically
I'm not
possible.
willing to touch this. As Natalie Wonkum, as a board member, I'm not willing to touch this.
That would be my recommendation as well.
I agree with Natalie Wonkum and Dr.
My
As the
Peluso.
board
concern is
member.
this. My concern is this. I'm looking at the suggested staffing mode. Is that part of that up there as well for the students? Is that up there?
Where are you, Mr.
You're
Taylor?
talking about this?
Yeah,
Under notes,
under notes, yeah. Do these schools have a principal, assistant principal, and a dean?
Yes.
these motor scooters are different.
So if you look at the high school as an example, it has 6
Situation
deans. They have
these
6
days.
deans. They have 6 career academies combined with 2 campuses and over 2,000 students.
Some bad motor scooters.
How many
It's
counselors
real
do
tough.
they have?
We reduced that. I'm not going to go over all of that, but
Your light
we've,
is on.
I'll show you in the plan where we reduce some vacant positions in schools. That's all I'm going to say about that at the moment.
Well, I think part of my reason is that until we see a huge reduction in
In discipline.
problems, that we need these positions.
If we had our principals in here right now, they would be advocating, please do not remove that resource from my campus. They go above and beyond. In fact, we have one that is sitting in the audience today, and I can speak for her work that she does on one of our campuses.
Without saying a word, raise your hand.
So we know we don't want to touch that.
That would be my recommendation.
Yeah, I
think
don't. I just want to
principals,
get an understanding of it. But
again, trying to protect
Keep
the
rolling.
school. Go ahead, Mr. Taylor. I didn't mean to interrupt.
I'm concerned that it's been here, what's this, 22, 23, 24. So what's the return on the investment?
Reductions in disciplinary
So
issues.
can we see that? And has that been documented? Can
Yes.
we show that? Okay.
Yep. Matter of fact,
If I could see that, I could have a better feeling
Sure.
about what's going on. That is a big jump,
you should see where we started.
okay?
When we started in post-COVID-19, where I think the year that kids all came back. So remember, when this school district in 2020, when I arrived, half of our students were in school and the other half were at home. When we went to all of our students coming back to school nationally as well as here, we saw a huge increase in fighting in our district, significant. And the deans are one reform effort we've used to reduce that. The second one is we changed the policy. That's why you're seeing a lot of expulsions come to you through that process. And being at the high school yesterday, talked to Dr. St. Louis. Wow, those kids at King of the Hill, when they were there, you could have heard a pin drop. Our kids, 2,000 kids in the arena, wonderful job.
It amazed me that we had that many students.
But we're also sending a message that, look, you're not going to fight here. If you want to fight here, you need to be removed because our teachers need to teach. And if they have to deal with significant discipline problems, it's disrupting their instruction and it's disrupting it for every single other kid within that school. Absolutely. And that's why we've got to continue to support our teachers when they're dealing with, and this is where we get into mental health and wraparound services and all of that. But I can show you, matter of fact, we look at discipline every Tuesday. If you remember back in the fall, we showed the disciplinary report where we're showing some declines, where there may be some spikes at some campuses. But just on behalf of our principals, it's up to you all, but I would advocate that these need to remain in place, and we'll continue to provide that discipline data. And I'm happy to share those discipline reports with you, Mr. Taylor, so you can kind of see an idea at each campus, the number of infractions that they have.
Would you send that to our emails? I'm sorry. Would you send that to our emails just to refresh again, please, sir?
Yeah, I can also put it in the weekly board report.
It's probably in the agendas, the past agendas, right there.
Just as a refresh, because we always need refreshing.
Just so it's at the top of the list, so it's easy to find and I don't have to go hunt and peck.
Sure.
And I was just going to say, as far as that, I echo with everyone else. I would not want to remove that because I was here when we brought everybody back. We need the deans. However, we also charged you with letting us know ways that we could reduce spending.
That's right.
And so that's why it's here.
And this is certainly here for
That's
just like
why
we're
it's
talking
here.
about benefits. It is purely up to the board. If you want to eliminate those
Correct.
positions, that's at your purview to do and direct me to do.
I would like to at least keep it on
The radar.
list.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And like you said, speaking with the principals and all the people involved so I can get a better picture of, what it is, because it's either going to be there or it's going to be somewhere else.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I would rather spend money that's going to help kids learn and pass tests and improve, instead of having to spend money making kids behave.
But that does help.
I understand,
those areas,
but understand what I'm saying, though. That,
And it goes right into the very next thing where we have how many assistant principals more than what we need? So we have principals, we have a lot of staff, and it makes me wonder, do we have the right staff in the right place if you have to continually add support to those people? That's just what comes to my mind. I'm not trying to be ugly, but that's the thought I have.
But it comes back to what I have always said, and I will reiterate again, we are top heavy. And with us being top heavy, that means we need to look at all areas. So we're not removing it, but we need to look at it.
Yeah.
I will reiterate, Natalie Woncomb says deans are needed. But we may want to look at the job description of a dean of students. We may want to look and see if they or he or her, him, needs to do something in addition or less and change something else.
Sure. And you'll see, well, I'm not going to go into that, but in part of the presentation I'll be doing, there's a piece of deans that are in that. I'm going to keep it at that. I'll be happy to do that individually with you when we meet and go, remember the conversation we had on dean? Here's where that component comes from.
Okay. All right, moving on. Brian, is everyone good?
Good.
Good, moving on?
Good.
All right.
Next line is assistant principals. There is a state standard that said APs are required once your student population at the school reaches 500 or more. They require a half-time for 500. So if you use that rule of the state, we've kind of broken that out in that we would need 10.5 rounded to 11. We currently have 19. So that would be an $885,000 line there to do a reduction.
Okay, I'm not a numbers person, so I'm a visual learner. So let's just use ABE 415 because they fall between 300 and 500, so that's why they need one assistant principal.
Well,
But-
actually, this
but what's
doesn't purely go by.
So they need a half.
They don't. They actually need 0 according to the state. So what we were doing was what I was doing was either reducing to the state. They currently have 1 AP at Amboy Elementary.
Okay.
The state says you need. The state says you need half for 500 students or more. And what we did, I used, was saying, okay, is it realistic to just totally remove an assistant principal from Amboy? I didn't think so. So I went to a medium in there between what we offer and what the state requires.
Okay.
So I used, if you'll notice this header right here, I used a 1.0 for 500 and used 0.5 for 300 to 500.
Okay.
That was, that, I was asked to look, is there a way to reduce assistant principals? And we are above the state average, we're above the state requirement. The state requirement says you don't need, you're not required to have an assistant principal until you reach 500, and then you're required to have a half-time.
Gotcha.
So I thought that, given what we have and given what the state requires, I went to a medium, and I said, okay, what if at North Little Rock we said, here's our standard. If you have 300 to 500 students,
Okay.
you'd have a half-time. If you had more than 500, you get a full-time. Even though the state says you don't need the half from 3 to 500.
Gotcha.
And this was just a scenario that I calculated.
Okay.
So under this scenario, which is more than what the state requires but less than what we currently offer, it would be a savings of $885,000. Any questions on that line?
Is there a special license for the assistant principals?
Yes.
Is there a special license or requirement for dean of students?
No. Just to have a license. You're
Okay.
required to have a
So
license.
those duties don't overlap in any way, shape, or form?
They get
They do overlap, but it's the name of the title of the position. To have a principal or assistant principal's title, you have to have a building level administrator certification from the state of Arkansas.
In case the principal is not there.
And then for a dean of students, that's not an administrative requirement. That requires just a teacher license from Department of Ed.
with
Do-
specialized training.
Do we know how often the principals aren't, I mean, how often the assistant principals cover for principals?
I'm just going to say this. I would be hard pressed to make any recommendation to reduce any of our assistant principals in our school district. When you look at the needs of each campus, they're significant. And it's important that if the principal's not there, that building needs to run just as if they are there. They do so much more than just discipline. They are, it's not only bus duty, but we're building them as instructional leaders as well. So my expectation is they're just as much as in classrooms as principals are. 10 of those classroom observations, 10 a week. I'm going to show you some data next week that concerns me about our district. And if I worry if we cut assistant principals, it's just another level of school-based support that's not going to be there. And my recommendation would be against any change to any assistant principal based on the needs of each school and each campus. I would have a hard time recommending that.
Agreed. With that being said, it's my understanding that our assistant principals also help with 504s and testing coordination.
Absolutely. I mean, they're testing they're like the utility person of the school. I mean, they're, you know, anything from instruction to maintenance to security to safety to budgeting, and they're points of contacts on a variety of different things.
And
just
And they also do classroom observations, just like with the
They
principal.
do classroom observations. They write, you know, observe teachers, because that's what we want them to do, right? That is our training ground for retaining our employees, because my expectation is we want you to become a principal one day. So when there's an opening, we can take right from the bench, and we've been trying to build that bench to promote from within every time that we can. And again, when you look at each school's data and you look at each school's needs, I don't know how we would be able to even do what we're doing if we didn't have our assistant principals.
So to piggyback on that, because we are growing our own, if we board members will remember, Amboy, we have a grow our own principal, assistant principal within that building. She was a teacher, now she is an assistant principal, so just keep that in mind.
Correct.
And that grow our own is like our motto,
Exactly.
so that we can
That's
keep
how we're
our
going to
own.
retain. That's how we're going to
Yes.
retain our talent. Is show them there's a pathway up if they choose to.
And I would say too, I'm referring back to the survey. I saw a lot of cut central admin, but I don't think I saw anything about cutting principals or assistant principals anywhere.
Or any. I haven't seen
No.
anything in there that says anything to
No.
touch a school.
I'm surprised we
not-
didn't have many more responses than what we did, but, I mean, that's neither here nor there.
We had over 500 responses, but some of those copied and pasted, if you will, or overlapped. And so by the time you added, combined, consolidated is the word I'm looking for, therefore there's where that 180 responses came from. So many of the voices echoed the same thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense, but that, to me, that doesn't give a true.
That was also licensed personnel only, so keep that in mind.
No, it wasn't.
I lied. That is not.
That's what I thought. Like, I thought that it was
wrong.
I
But it's-
thought that it was more than that, but I mean, I get it. Whoever responded. But, and if you didn't respond, then you just didn't respond. But I mean, I like if a survey is put out there, I like to get good responses and have a good pool of people that respond back to those, because that's 179, 180, whatever y'all said, that's very dismal.
That's true, but remember, Angela, remember, sins of the past and retaliation for doing those surveys. So there is a lot of fear for our individuals, for our family members to fill out a survey. Now, we're changing that culture, I hope. I hope we're doing better. But again, sins of the past still haunt us.
But I think
And I hate that because, I mean, you know, what you gonna do to me?
I think
Come
that
see me.
any survey that is done, though, you don't ever, I'm not going to say don't ever, you rarely get 100%.
I'm not asking for
there's-
100%, but I
No.
mean a little bit closer in the gap. I mean, like
there are
179
numbers.
out of 1250.
All right, can I
that's
bring us
sad.
back? It's 12 o'clock, and we still got a long way to
Okay,
go.
come on, let's roll.
Thank you.
Okay, next line, STEAM facilitators.
And the only thing I'm going to say about that is there is a portion of the plan that deals with this line item. That's all I'm going to say. So I think to talk about that, I think I should do that individually with each one of you.
So what you just said was the part of the plan was the future plan that we have not all put out in the public yet, correct?
Part of it, that's correct.
Moving right along.
Yeah, moving along.
Dual employees, next line. We have employees that have dual jobs in the district, whether they're a custodian and a bus driver or an aide and a bus aide. And these dual jobs create additional expenses for the district because employees are working more than 40 hours a week, and those are overtime overtime situations. So there's a cost savings there if we separate the jobs of over $100,000, $125,000. Reduce ESL teachers. And I believe this is a reduction of, it says reduction of 2 FTEs. That number doesn't look right. I think that's a 1 FTE. This should actually read 1, reduce 1 FTE.
On which one, line 8?
Yes, line 8. I think this should actually read 1.
I would just like to advocate for that line, that I would not recommend that we reduce any of our services to our English language learners. It's one of our growing populations within our student population, and there's a significant need. In fact, we restructured that over the year to get our ratio. The national ratio, I think, is 1 to 35 students is the national, what they say in an average, and I think we're at 1 to 50 per number of students. But that number continues to increase. Again, this is back to the classroom. I would highly not recommend that we do that, but that's up to you.
To go back to item 9, number 7, although that would be a savings until we have enough bus drivers, we might want to think about if we have employees that are willing to do dual duties.
And I think that's
Keep that
exactly
in
right.
mind.
That's my understanding, Dr. Redis, is the reason we have that is because
We
that's
don't have
filling a
enough.
gap of a reduction
Yes.
of bus drivers, and so that fills a gap. And I think if we didn't have them, it would be more difficult on the transportation side.
Especially the aides.
Yes.
Y'all don't want me driving buses.
You don't want to drive the bus?
But that's
We gonna run over stuff and everything. Y'all don't want that.
Keep in mind, it is a reminder that when you're a bus driver, you have a CDL. And if you get pulled over, there's points against your driver's license. That's a whole nother conversation for a different day. So there is a discouragement for some not to have a CDL. So our coaches, we're very blessed because our coaches, I want to say over 90% of our coaches
they're
have
CDL
CDLs. So
certified.
I do appreciate that and want to shout out to them for that.
I agree.
Yep. Let's keep it
Shout
going.
out to them.
Let's go.
Keep it going.
And I'll just say.
Almost down to the end.
I'll say lines 8, 9, and 11. Those are all funded out of ESA funding. And since since one of our funding impact is ESA, that's why those 3 items are on there. ESL, and then line 9, nurses, and line 11. ALE has its own funding line, but it doesn't receive enough funding in ALE funds for the program, so we pay the difference out of ESA. So ESA is the balancing fund for ALE. So that's why those 3 are on there, just for consideration. But, all right, so the next line is number 9, reduce RN positions. And we've added some RN positions over time, especially during COVID. And that's on there. That represents a reduction of 2 positions.
Can I jump in here on this one? Sorry, nurses, but on back to the salary schedules, I have never understood why we will pay for something we don't need. Like, if the nurses have a master's degree, we're paying them for their master's, and if the job doesn't require it, I don't know why we're paying that. So I'm just throwing that back out there on those salary schedules. That's something we need to decide if.
Ma'am, I agree, and I can speak from the nurse position since I do have an RN license, and I used to make a living way back in the day doing this. First of all, I agree. Number 2, when you're trying to recruit a nurse, we are, unlike a school district, you might be competing to hire teachers from under the school district. We're competing against a huge industry that's bigger than education when you're trying to get an RN. Completely different animal trying to recruit one of those. And our RNs, they're hard to come by, but the other problem with it is, well, most of them, not a problem, but most of them that we get, they're doing it for the schedule. And they They, based off quality of life that they want, they take a significant pay cut, but that is their choice. So if they have a master's, yet you decide to do that, I get it. Why are we paying them more? You went through an active process to apply for this job. At that point, equity is equity. However, RNs are just a little bit different as they reduce risk for the district. If you don't have an RN at a certain school, because the state guideline says you don't have to because the school's not big enough, and then a child has a seizure, or a child starts slipping into a diabetic crisis,
coma, yeah.
or sickle cell anemia, or wherever, and that does happen. That happened to me on a plane one day, and we say we train teachers in certain things. No offense to teachers, but they're not RNs. They're not medical professionals. This happened, like I said, it happened on a plane. They do the same kind of training with flight attendants. It wasn't going good. I got to step in and help, and fortunately, Grandma survived because she was going into a diabetic coma at that point. It was pretty bad. Does the school district want to face that risk, yes or no?
Right.
However, to get around some of that, do I think we've had some of our, by looking at it, do I think we've had some of our RN positions, probably, most likely, in the wrong places? And the answer so far has been yes. So because of that, driven by this shortage as a forcing function, we have already adjusted that. So some of that
And
has already been addressed. And we will continue to do that. But having one in every school is really where you want to be. Pikeview is a little bit different because the low traffic for any kind of, nursing need there, and, it's its own little island. But everywhere else, there was one or two schools we had too many, and another one we didn't have one. So we've made that adjustments already.
My question to that would be, is it state mandated that we have an RN instead of an LPN?
That is a good question.
The state
State-
requirement is that you have one
for the district.
RN for the district. That's the state requirement.
Okay.
You're required to have one RN per district.
Okay.
You could have CNAs, you could have LPNs, you have to have one supervising RN per district.
Okay,
That's the state requirement.
I'm not interested in deducting anything right now. I'm just inquiring for more information about this topic.
Yes, ma'am, that is true. LPNs can almost do everything an RN can. So do you have to have an RN in every school? No. The big difference between the two are really what kind of drugs one can push versus the other. If you
Yes.
have a student now that needs that,
Right.
there's nothing to say we can't adjust them and move a nurse around to cover down on that. And then have an LPN where you don't need that, sure. But that's just operationalizing that and getting people to accept the fact that based off the needs of the district, you might have to move around every once in a while. But at the end of the day, no, you do not have to have an RN.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Piggyback off your question before you go away from that. So that means that in the future, if a nursing position becomes available,
a vacant,
we,
and then
a vacant,
then
we
rather
could
than
fill
hire an
it with
RN,
an
you could hire the
LPN
LPN.
versus an RN.
You could phase that out, I guess is what you're maybe saying, is you could phase that over time.
You can, but
I'm sorry.
But it
I
would
was
be,
just
But
gonna
you're-
say, like, maybe have like a nurse manager maybe, and then.
But ma'am, if you're looking for a cost savings, you're not gonna get much.
Agreed. Yes.
We pay, our salary schedule, we pay RNs about $60,000 a year. LPNs almost make that. I mean, literally. Starting RN out there in, hospital environment is about 80.
I was just saying as far as finding them, like we
It-
were
it
talking
could-
about the bus drivers and we have
As
other
far as
people doing
recruiting,
dual.
that would open up a bigger pool, yes.
That's what I was looking at.
Sorry. No, you're good. You're okay.
Bless you.
okay, let's keep it going, Mr. Brown.
All right, two more. Reevaluate security personnel. And I believe when Chief Finks was brought on board and we invested in safety and security, he asked for staffing at a certain level and had committed to the district that over time he would reevaluate that, and he would evaluate whether he would need that level of staffing going forward. So that's a line on here for us to consider as well.
I would like to jump in here and pause for a moment. So we need to discuss, in my opinion, security personnel. Because we talked about deans, we talked about associate principals, we've talked about, we have not discussed SROs yet. And I know that, is that within our budget? No, right?
they're,
Correct.
they're funded by the city.
Right. But
Yeah.
we have SROs.
They are partially in our budget for sporting events and stuff, but
For
around the campus.
Yeah, overtime,
they
not
are-
the day-to-day.
Right, they're a gift from the city.
Yes.
Okay, we love our gift. Thank you, City of North Little Rock, for our gift.
They're
So
hard.
with that being said, this is still something we may need to look at. We may not need 2 SROs, 5 deans, and I'm making up numbers, so bear with me. 2 SROs, 5 deans, 6 assistant principals, and 14 security personnel in one campus. And I'm making up numbers. So that is something we need to consider.
Ma'am, that has been looked at, and it is in a future plan that will be presented.
Thank you.
I also just want to add that we recently had an expulsion hearing in which you saw a video in which 2 SRO officers were needed in order to address the issue and remove the threat.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
and it's a big campus. That's why there's 2 assigned to that campus, as you know. But sure, we're happy to dig in and look at it. And remember, the only thing other I want to send is to commend the board of, since I arrived in 2020 to where we are today, you've invested over $1 million in safety and security. We've always said our number one priority is safety, and high levels of teaching and learning are just the expectation. We're still at a day and age and time where we cannot look the other way at any time, because our safety is paramount, and I will put our safety program up against anyone's in the United States. There's not many elementary schools that have a CSSO officer on their campus.
The state of Arkansas put it into the LEARNS Act to replicate our safety plan.
Oh,
So I'm not willing to budge unless we need to budge.
sure,
But we need to evaluate.
of course. Yep, bring us home, Brian. That's Brown, excuse me.
Last item, is on here is reduce ALE staffing. And there's not an amount there, but we are spending roughly $2.4 million on the ALE program with ALE expenses. And I'll just hop right back over to the ALE funding that we get is $5,086 per student. And that's the ALE funding, $825,000. So the difference, $825 and $2.4 million, comes out of ESA. So ESA is the balancing fund for the ALE program. So that's on there. I just think there probably needs to be an evaluation of the program to see if there are areas where we can reduce expenditures for ALE program.
So again, Natalie won't come on the mic. The ALE program is not just one campus, correct?
It serves students 6 through 12.
So we have students not only in the academy, in the ALE program. Is that what I'm understanding?
Say that again.
So
Lower and louder, please.
can you hear me now?
It's louder.
The
Worked 3 weekends
the
in a while.
children are not only at the academy in the ALE program.
That's correct.
We have children off campus from ALE in the ALE program.
Correct. So if you're talking about virtual, that would be, I think, a good example of what you're talking about. They're attached to ALE, and when we go through expulsions and so forth, or change of placement, and the recommendation is going to virtual, that virtual does fall under the umbrella of ALE, even though that child is physically not on the 6 through 12 campus at the academy.
What about
Did
the
I
day?
clarify that?
Yes.
What about the what?
What about the day treatment? We pay for day treatment for some students, don't we?
We do.
Those are not considered ALE students.
Oh, okay.
Those are divided between regular ed and special ed situations. So those are operational expenses for day treatment.
Tell me the number again of the difference that we pay out of the ESSA funds for the ALE. I'm not attacking it, but I want to know the number again.
Regular, day 25, day 25, 924.
1.57 million.
And that's for what again?
That's that is the amount we transfer from ESSA to ALE to pay for the ALE expenses that exceed ALE funding.
So without getting rid of ALE, from what I'm understanding, ESSA funds are no longer.
Correct. Those of ESSER, the federal. So, right.
Thank
so
you.
He's talking
ESSER.
about ESA, Enhanced Student Achievement. That's state funding, and that if you go back to the reductions, that the amount of money we get in state ESA is directly tied to the poverty rate, and that poverty rate going down will show us $1 million less in the ESA budget. ESSER had gone away for this year in September.
Okay,
I know
so
it's confusing, ESA, ESSER.
that's why we ask those follow-up questions. So with that being said, from what I'm understanding and what I'm hearing then, is we supplement the 1.57 million to the ALE program, and what individuals need to remember, some people label that as the prison pipeline. Those are our kids that are high risk. So we need to remember that in the forefront.
So, you know, you're exactly right. Remember, you go all the way back to the 100-day transition plan summary report, and there's a whole section of data in there about our students at ALE. You know, you can get into ALE in kindergarten. So now our model is K2 is at Indian Hills, and 3, 4, and 5 are at Glenview. So we tried to consolidate. Even if I'm at ALE, side note, even if I'm at ALE in 5th grade at Glenview, but my home school is Crestwood, my data gets attached to Crestwood, not that campus. That's important to know. In the 6 through 12 model, but when you look at the data, when a child gets into ALE, traditionally in our school district, they never leave. They never exit out of that program and get back into their home school, which is where we need them. Now remember, to get into ALE, there's 3 factors. But there's a stigma that it's all the bad kids go to ALE. You have to have more than a qualifier for that. However, when you dig into that more deeply, the predominant number of students that are in ALE are African American males. And when you look at our graduation data that I will share with you, that it's combined at 78%. When you look at the disparities in the gap between males and females, females are at an 83% graduation rate, and males are at 74%. I'm very concerned about our graduation rate, but ALE is directly tied to making sure and improving and supporting students, because even though they're not a school, they're a program, but their data gets attached to the high school and the Center of Excellence. So do we need to revamp some things? Absolutely. We have 38 students right now that I know, we were just working with Mr. Williams, 38 students that he knows right now that are in our community that dropped out. We need to start a whole campaign about drop back into North Little Rock, because there's 35 students out there that we know that are probably in high needs, that they need to be back into school, and they need to be getting the support that they need, because there's a reason they dropped out. We've got to stop that, and we've got to do a better job of servicing our most vulnerable students and changing that entire continuum. Maybe if you dug into that even further, of those African American males, if I showed you their reading level, it's really at a lower level, and we've got to intervene earlier. It's my point. Not to go on the whole ALE component, but it's there as a stopgap to stop kids from graduating and get back. Now the other side of this is, and I'll wrap up this, we've seen students in the last couple of years. leave ALE and go back to campus. And yes, and I mean, there's some positive stories that are happening, but when I look at how much, you asked this question, Mr. Taylor, what's our return on investment? I question that with, this is what we're paying, but when I look at our data, it tells me a different story. And I think we've got to do more work around reinventing that and providing more wraparound services to kids and families. I digress. Oh, Mr. Brown, the other thing before we get into the topic, did the high school schedule, is that in here? Because I want the board to know that data as well.
Is there another bucket?
It's not on this spreadsheet.
Is it in the total?
No, it's not in the totals, but
There it is, sorry.
where are you?
It's in bucket 2,
Okay.
Bucket 2.
line 6.
There you go.
Where's it at?
I think we
Sorry.
Bucket
skipped
2.
that.
Bucket 2, line
Bucket
6.
Line 6. Okay, I apologize.
We skipped that one.
Yes.
Is it yellow, green, or purple?
No color.
Pink. I want it pink.
So go ahead, Mr. Brown.
Okay.
So, the scheduling, the way the schedule works at the high school, there's an A day and a B day, and teachers have a prep on each day. Our periods, our blocks are 90 minutes long. So if you do 90 times 5, if I have a prep every day, it's 450 minutes of prep.
And what's the state minimum, Mr. Brown?
State minimum is 200 minutes. So if we were to adjust that so that teachers...
Wait a minute, run that by me one more time. Let me make sure I heard that right. You said the state minimum is what now?
200 minutes per week prep.
200 minutes per week.
Mhm.
And they get 450.
Correct, based upon this model. So when you go back and look at elementary, and this is when we got into the whole discussion about early release days and trying to give teachers more release time for PD individual planning. With that 200 minutes, that did expand it a little bit more. But on the high school side, it's over 400. Is that included? Did we include early release in there too? In that number? No, that was just a straight 400 minutes. So it's beyond that. It's another 400. It's almost 500 minutes in a week. And that's almost twice as much as an elementary and middle school teacher gets currently. So that's beyond, remember the state minimum is 200. So
So the way this works is if instead of getting a prep every day of 90 minutes, we'd have to look at the scheduling there. But if we were to reduce that to where we were at the 200 minute prep time, obviously teachers could pick up additional classes, which would in turn require less staffing. So this would be,
What a sub amount.
so this amount that is calculated is assuming that teachers pick up additional classes to teach. Instead of having 450 minutes of prep, they'd have 200, and then we could reduce staff at the high school to service the students. So this would be the savings that we've calculated.
Wow.
yeah, that's significant. The only thing I would say about this particular topic is right now in time, the schools are all scheduling for next year. So my recommendation, if you're going to consider this, I would not consider it for this year. I would consider it for next year. This is more of a fall conversation to prepare the implementation for a year. I don't think the timing right now would be the best, and I also think we need to have, input and so forth. But it is at your purview. If you direct me that go do that, then that's what I would go do.
Not a directive, but a question.
Would we need to poll the teachers on their input on that, or no, that's something?
If I was making that decision, I would want to have all the information at my fingertips before I made it. Yes, I would want to survey teachers as well. You know, they get those 2 planning times a day, plus they've got early release. Now, the other side of me is when I look at the data, there should be a direct correlation between planning and the delivery of instruction. When you've got nearly 500 minutes of instruction in a week, my question would be, are we using the planning time that we have effectively? And if the answer to that is yes, so be it. If the answer to that is maybe or no, then that's a different conversation to have. But in a school district, in my experience, in a school district like our size, it's very rare to have, at a high school, to have a common planning time such as this every single day with 90 minutes. I mean, that's a luxury to have. But if you were deciding to go down this road, again, I would not recommend you implement this now. I think you need to study it. I think you need to get teacher impact, student impact, to make a decision in the fall to implement a year from now. But that's also at your purview if you want to charge me with looking at their schedule and reducing the time now. Okay.
Board members, do y'all have an input? Do you want to gather information for a future?
I think we start looking at it now.
Yeah, we can start looking at it most definitely because, you know, I'm sitting here thinking about the amount of times, you know, hey, we don't even, I have been asked, you know, or told to that, hey, I don't even really get a lot of communication from whether it's principals, admin, or return phone calls from instructors. Like, I'm thinking that some of that should be some of that too. Am I correct? As far as returning phone calls to parents? And if we're not getting it.
Pep time? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
So, okay, yeah. Just wanted
So,
clarification.
yeah. So if they're not doing that, then like, why we have 450 minutes?
Well, I think
And that's just a rhetorical. That's not to be answered right now if necessary. But, you know, but
Yeah.
that's just something that I
Sure.
start looking at because I do get a lot of.
Devil's in the details. But it sounds like, to kind of wrap this one up, is
Yeah.
the board doesn't necessarily want to take an action on this
But it needs to
or
be
recommend it,
looked
but
at.
you want us to study it.
Since we are looking at having to cut more, 4 million more to try to be able to give our teachers a raise, which is so needed. We've got to do that. We've
Yes.
got to. These things have to stay listed in the buckets.
Sure.
But I really think we need to be taking a look at this starting early, even if it means this summer, looking at some of these things, which would
Gotcha.
be for the year, 26, 27.
I got you. Is that the consensus of the board?
Yes.
We'll leave it on here.
Let's
You want us
look
to
at-
study it? We'll bring it back for a discussion early in the fall as we start building the next budget.
Well,
and
just
then-
just as a wrap up, so that make sure that I got it clear. My secretary wasn't writing over here, so I'm gonna shoot from the hip and see if I did this right. So what we're saying is that in bucket one,
Oh,
anything that was in yellow, we're not even thinking about.
I thought holiday
Bucket
pay.
one.
In bucket one,
Yes.
bucket one,
That was in bucket 2, holiday pay.
You're right. I think the things
bucket
in
one
Yeah.
is benefits.
Oh, yeah, keep all that.
Okay.
Reduction, okay.
All
So
right.
out of bucket
So
one, the only
let-
thing, we
let
all
me-
agree, we're
In
not touching
bucket
anything in yellow.
one, anything, I'm just looking at the yellow parts, not the
Yes.
green parts.
Correct.
So in the yellow, bucket one, we're not looking at that, any of it. That's
Off the
all
table.
benefits, it's off the table.
Yes, ma'am.
In bucket two,
Hang on, boss.
I'm
Just
sorry.
want, is everybody in agreement with the recommendations of the superintendent and everything in green that we can reduce operational costs by 1.4 million?
Yes.
yes.
Okay. Mr. Taylor?
I'm still looking at bucket one.
That was all the stuff like food, licenses, paper, yeah, those things that we can reduce.
Okay, yes, I'm in.
Okay, so I got that number. Okay.
Bucket two,
Yes.
Wait a minute, stop. so, but, okay, that's 1.416114, right?
Yep.
Okay, got you.
Bucket 2, boss.
Bucket 2, line item 4, line item 7. We definitely want you to bring it back to us.
Yes.
We're going to further discuss line item 6, just not to take effect come August.
This is bucket 2?
Yeah, for a year out.
Are we in bucket 2?
We-
Yes, bucket 2, okay.
So you,
I'd like to just bring it back. I didn't say.
okay. That's fair.
Hang on, is
So-
that, I just want to make sure, is that, are you lumping that in the same category as number 6? Like, you want us, we'll look at that, but something that's more of a fall conversation, or is that something that you want to look at now for reduction?
4 and 7 is for August.
4 and 7's August, done.
5 and 6
Keep on the list.
keep on the list because it may
Yep.
take effect the next one.
Yep, for FY 27. Yes, ma'am.
There we
Okay.
But please let me know what 5 looks like.
Oh, yeah.
Even though
We're going to keep talking about it. Yeah.
Sure.
So 4 and 7, nix, and then 5 and 6.
We're going to keep
Next
talking
year.
about it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Then in bucket 3,
Oh, stop.
oh,
I don't
sorry.
want to say we're going to talk about 5 next year. I'd like to look at 5. Now, I'm just one. I understand that, but I'd like to look at.
I'd like to make one point. So 4 and 5, if you were to do both, that's, to get the total cost of this, you would have to remove this 170 from this 560. Because really this is a either or, but I'm assuming you wouldn't want to reduce 245 to 240 and then come back the next year and reduce 240 down to 235. I think 240 was the,
Right, but I thought we were gonna make some exception on on reducing from 245. I
That's
wanna
correct.
keep that exception,
yes.
okay? So it wouldn't be
Looking
a
at
double
the
hit.
certain ones.
Right, the ones that we deemed get the exception, or the exemption, let them keep it.
So
But
that's
I
back to the
still-
classified
Right.
custodians.
Yes. So I do wanna look at both of them, but don't
With
change
the
what the
exceptions.
plan is. Yeah.
What was that? My paper's
All
falling
right.
apart.
Bucket 3,
Wait just a minute.
Oh.
I just want to make
Oh, oh.
sure. 4 and 7 is in this year.
we're talking about this year. This
This year.
coming in
5 and
August.
6, we're going to be looking at for the 26-27 school year.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Well, except you said you would, he's saying he would like to see the days number, is that
For number 5.
Number 5, he'd like to just get some feedback right now.
Gotcha.
And
You just
maybe-
want the feedback for now. But collectively,
But 4 and 7 are done.
yep.
Correct.
4, 7s are the ones that are on for this fiscal year.
Okay.
We're gonna look at 5 and 6. We'll give you that information now, but the thinking is that's something really we gotta tackle in the fall
Correct.
for FY
Yeah,
27.
we want the information
Yeah.
to be thinking about it, but
Okay. I gotcha.
when you bring the plan,
Yep.
when you bring the whole plan of the 5.1,
Okay.
include 4 and 7
Yes.
in it as well, is what I'm saying.
Yes.
Oh. For FY 26.
That's what she.
Okay, so you,
To start in August
Mm-hmm.
For 25, 26.
for the,
25, 26.
yes.
yeah, I just lost me there for a second.
Yeah, and
So-
I got confused. We're not
So,
back.
let's start from the beginning. Number 4, reduce all contracts by 245 by 5 days. You want us to go re-examine that for an action of the FY 25, 26, this upcoming
Yes.
budget.
This upcoming budget.
Yes.
We got number 4. Number 5, for this upcoming budget, you want us to look at all reduction of contracts that are greater than 195 by 5 days.
We don't need action on that.
We don't-
next year.
Well, Mr. Taylor wants that information, but I think the consensus is that we don't want action on it
You
for
just want
this
the
contract
Just see what
year.
it looks
You
like.
just want the
Let's see
information.
what it looks
Okay.
like.
Just see what it looks like.
Number 6, the high school schedule.
We're gonna talk about it.
6/27.
Yeah,
Starting
we're
next
gonna talk about
That
it.
one is definitely off the table for this, making a fiscal decision for this year.
Correct.
But you want it to start and begin the conversation for the following.
So that the next year we'll be ready
Understood.
to
So I
roll it
noticed
in.
you've put in.
Because that gives us time, I'm sorry,
Sorry.
that gives us time to talk to the teachers and get their feedback and
Absolutely.
all
They're right in the
that.
middle of scheduling now.
Right.
I would advise we
Right.
touch that at
Right.
this time without feedback from them and an
Correct.
implementation plan.
Correct.
Ms. McLean.
I was just gonna say, on number 6, he's added in study for FY '27. We could put that in for number 5. Also, study for FY '27.
No, I don't want to do that. That's why I was asking you if we
But
could look at it now. Now, that's my suggestion.
He wants to see it before.
He wants to
makes up
see
his
it
mind.
before he makes up his mind for all of it.
Yes.
Sure.
I think the data can, yes, I agree. The data, yes, would be this year's information, yes. And then there will be no action, though. Nothing will be put in place because we don't have enough time, to be honest, until the following year. Because that affects the scheduling for the high school right now.
Right.
That is an immediate ripple effect if we take action right now.
Why would it?
I don't,
I don't agree with that.
Are y'all talking about number 5 or number
You talking
6?
about 5 or 6?
He was talking about 5.
We're talking about
I
5.
apologize.
Yeah.
flipped my
I think everybody's on page with 6
yeah,
about schedule because of the time, but
Right.
I'm kind of the consensus is around number 5 is the information, but don't consider that for the following fiscal year. Mr. Taylor would like it to considered for this fiscal year.
correct. That's the, that's
Once
the,
we
that's the
see-
statement.
All right,
Once
so
we see
we'll,
what it
we'll,
looks
all right, so we'll get those numbers, and at that time, you can make a decision about 5. So
Correct.
we're gonna consider 5 for this year.
Correct. We're gonna consider it,
Okay.
but
Okay.
4 is a consensus. That's what we want.
Okay.
And then 7 is a consensus. That's what we want.
Okay.
Okay, ma'am, Mr. Brown said this, and I want to make sure it's not, there was some conversation going on when he said it, that, and Mr. Brown, tell you if I'm wrong here, but 4 and 5 are either or.
That's correct. I think what I'd like to do is, if you don't mind, I'm gonna say, reduce all contracts that are between,
195 and 254.
245.
Oh.
So it wouldn't include 245.
Right.
Done, and then you can go a step further, and so you can reduce all 245-day contracts by 5 days. But you also can dip down further, go deeper to 195 and do a 5-day reduction. So what I'm gonna do is I'm redoing this, and then this number
The math's going to change.
is actually.
what I'm getting at.
yes.
The math's is not gonna change, though, is it?
The math will change,
math
It
ma'am.
will change.
It will change. That's why I
Okay.
wanted to make sure that was clear, that,
Okay.
I'm gonna
yes.
do it here, so equals this minus.
Because the way it was written, essentially, if you looked
Okay,
at both
so
at the
that-
same
That
time,
number changed from
245 would
560,000
hit
to
twice. So
390.
that 170 is not real.
Right. Okay,
A little bit less.
undo.
But that still doesn't include the classifications of the ones that we don't want to change from 245, correct?
We have noted that.
Okay.
We have to
You have to get the figures for that, okay.
Okay. All right, I think we're clear.
Okay,
3.
that's in parentheses. It's 195 days to 245, or 240 now, since the
Right, it looks like it's
245.
245, anything
Be 240, wouldn't it?
I just
Well, that'd be
changed
for next year, though.
I just changed it.
Okay.
Well, if you do 245 reduction by 5, then all 245 become 240.
240.
Then your 40 now is your highest, so this would include dipping down to anyone that's not a 240 would also get a 5-day reduction. So this is box line 4 would be a 5-day reduction for everybody that's 245 or greater, with certain exemptions considered, and then line 5 would just be reaching further down than 245, reaching all the way down to 195 and doing a 5-day reduction.
So does a 309,
Ma'am,
that number of employees?
based off Mr. Taylor's request, the original intent of this, you couldn't do them at the same time. Now we're going to look at them at the same time, so the data we're presenting right now is incorrect.
Right,
we
so
can
the
go-
309 is not correct.
Yeah, I'll have to.
We need to
You'll
go
have to
back and
change that
fix it
number.
and then give it to you.
Right. But you have reduced the amount over there on
Yes,
the
I have done
right-hand
that.
side.
Yes, the 390 is accurate.
Okay. We just don't have the number for number 4 yet, the right amount.
You good, Mr. B?
Yes.
Okay. Boss, bucket
And-
3?
And then you got number 7.
Yep.
To bring that back, okay. And bucket 3,
We
it,
probably need to discuss.
all of it, from consensus, from what I heard, unless I heard wrong, was bring it back for discussions.
Now, what does that mean?
What did you say?
From the way it sounded, nobody wanted it to happen come August.
As far as the totality of bucket 3?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Nothing in bucket 3.
Everything in
relates to the
bucket
level
3
of-
was
Possibility
a
for
possibility for
FY27.
FY27.
Bucket 3 touches the classroom on
Yeah.
every level.
School classroom support.
And so it was, that's what I'm asking for
I
consensus,
thought we said we were gonna at least look at it.
but
because
not
of
for
the-
F20, not
I
for
don't
this
want to look at
upcoming
any of
school
that
year.
in bucket 3 for this coming year. I would look at it for 2027 year. That's me.
I agree with that.
That was the consensus that,
Yes.
from listening to everybody's comments,
Mm-hmm.
it sounded to me like everybody wants to talk about it, but just not to take effect come August.
No action taken on it this current school year, this
I
upcoming.
think we should
Should wait to
school year.
27, but that's my opinion.
I just didn't wanna make that decision before I see what it looks like. It may not be total. It may be just 1 or 2, or it may, something else may come of it. But just
So
to
is there
say-
is there anything in here specifically, Mr. Taylor, that you would like to consider to eliminate for this academic school year coming up?
Can you go back to that?
Sure. So the first one is early morning, that's lunch age, that's directly support to schools, the dean of students at the secondary and one at the elementary, assistant principal positions.
I'd like to look at the one you just said, the first one.
I'm sorry,
That
early
one.
morning,
Yeah.
okay?
Like I said, I'm not saying we do it, but I'd like to see what it looks like and see if we can do something, instead of working harder, work smarter. If there's something else out there that we can do differently. The assistant principal and the deans,
You want to look at reducing
I'd
those?
like to look at if there's something else we can do, or if there's something that our employees recommend, say, hey, I can do this, I can do that,
They
that's
not
not a problem.
So that would mean eliminating school-based support.
No, that's not what I'm saying. Yes, you're right, I understand, that's a support position.
Mhm.
However, but I wanna go back to them and say, hey, is this something you can do now? Are things changing?
Yeah,
Can you handle that?
sure. And I would love for the fact, when this is over, Ms. Roberts there, she's one of our deans. I would love to her to just talk to you specifically about what she does every
Mhm.
day, just to give you some insight as to her work.
Okay.
Okay.
To me, the things in bucket 3 are gonna require a lot of consideration, a lot of information, a lot of feedback, and the time frame that we're working in to have something effective for the coming year,
Right.
it doesn't allow for that.
That's,
Yes,
What-
that's why I was trying to get clarity of what
That's the
the
problem.
difference in what we need done today and what we need done this time next year.
Yes, ma'am. That's why we have literally just assigned the task. I did to 2 different people to do the analysis over lunch aids, crossing guards, and safety involved with that. That won't be complete until April.
Okay.
There's no way to get it done in time.
Right.
All these other ones, though, sir, what we can do is say, hey, all of these are, research areas we can dig into, let's say over the next 12 months or whatever, and come back with all that data, because we might, for all we know, we might be doing it good, bad, or right down the middle or whatever. Just can't give you the answer yet, because I don't know if this has been looked at before. I don't know, but I can tell you we're tackling.
Right.
We're doing the low-hanging fruit right now, working our way up.
So the other thing, and if we do touch any of these, Mr. Taylor, just to know, then that means these positions would be eliminated, and contracts are getting ready to go out. So any employee that does not get a contract, there's a list that the board is privy to, and then the board has to vote on everyone that's getting a contract for the following year. So we're in about a 3-week window from all that happening. But if it's the will of the board to cut school-based positions, that's your purview. That wouldn't be my recommendation to do that now, but we will look at it.
Okay.
Okay.
That's it.
All right. That's
Any more questions?
And so if we go down to the totals there that Mr. Brown has, bucket 1 reduction, operational 1.4 million, school-based reductions, absorbing vacant positions. Is that off of this, Brian? Or is that some other information we have yet to share?
No, this is not from the sheets.
I didn't think so. Really, the only thing on that list is 1.4 million in budget reductions, but I think we've got our marching orders from what needs to be immediate and what needs to be more long-term, and what those numbers are, so you can get that information.
Correct.
Okay. Don't forget you also have your budget, the request of your budget sheets and your budget questions. Is there any other, I guess, direction that you would want to direct me so I can direct my staff? That sounds like at the top of our plate is these items in buckets 1, 2, and not so much 3. Get that information to you as soon as possible, so you have an idea of the.
To include it with the reorganization.
I gotcha. Well, I'll add a slide into there that just talks about what we talked about today, and this is kind of where the whole shooting match would be.
And so we can have the whole total savings
Gotcha.
in front of us.
Yes, ma'am.
So, because it's the elephant in the room, what is the timeline on presenting the presentation for the reorganization?
That is up to the Board of Education. We, let me check. We do have a regular meeting. No, we have a board workshop next week.
Yep.
So there's 2 things that you have at your purview. That's on the 6th. That's a special board meeting. That's a special board meeting / workshop. So you have a choice. Either we can call a special meeting early in the week, like Tuesday, and have this as the only action item, is present the plan, or we can present the plan in special board meeting as an action item on Thursday. Now, that also goes, which is a different conversation, about meeting with individual board members. So I don't.
So
before the plan.
I would like to see it happen Tuesday, because I know the reorganization plan, if passed, would go to the LPPC
Yes.
and CPPC
Yes.
for 10 days.
Yes, ma'am.
And we're already on this very tight framework of time.
So having said that, Ms. McLean, let's play that out. So if we call a special board meeting on the 4th and present the reorganization plan, it goes up to 10 days. Mr. Brown, I believe that's 10 business days, not calendar days. Business, thank you. So that would mean starts on the 4th, so that's 5, 6, 7. Let me see here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So that goes to March 18th for it to go to LPPC and CPPC for 10 days, unless we meet earlier than that and get their feedback. And I think Ms. Stumpenhouse, and I've asked Mr. Smith that I think they're anxious just as much as we are to have this meeting, look at the plan, me go over it, ask questions, and then at that point, we can bring it back to the board as soon as we can. That week, the 20th is a regular board meeting, but if it's on Tuesday, I'm able to meet with them maybe by the end of the week or earlier in the week. You could hold a special board meeting the week of the 10th to the 14th to vote on it, but as late as the 20th.
So
The earlier the better.
Okay. Tuesdays are really hard for me.
So as a poll, without voting, a poll-only board members, availability for Tuesday, can you raise your hand
For which
if
week?
available?
Just Tuesdays in general, or which week?
No, Sissy, like this coming
Tuesday.
Tuesday.
Like in
Coming
2
Tuesday,
days.
like in 2 days.
Y'all let me look at my
Like today is
The 4th.
Saturday, we go to church on
March-
Sunday,
March 4th,
we get prayed up, and then come Tuesday, we present it to the public.
the 4th, May 4th.
Oh, I should raise my
Or
hand since I asked that question.
We can, or
Not yet. I'm looking at
Okay.
my calendar.
while she's looking, let me throw this other thought out. We've earmarked the second Thursdays for expulsions and employee hearings.
Mm-hmm.
What if we did the presentation on Thursday the 6th, then by the 13th, would the LPPC have had a chance to meet if y'all meet early?
And it's not just us, it's also CPVC.
Oh, yeah, I forgot it. Never mind, scratch that thought.
PPCs.
Scratch that thought.
I mean,
Because
it's-
my,
I
'cause
would
my
say it's-
thought
it's
was,
possible
if
that-
it had have worked, we could have meet again on the 13th, because we've already earmarked that
Sure.
date. And then, yeah.
Sure.
So
But
Okay, what about
scratch
Monday
that.
night?
Monday night,
Monday night.
may I have a poll for board members on availability on Monday night for a special board meeting?
This
Yes,
is
sir.
Monday.
Which would be better for you, Monday or Tuesday?
If we can do it at 6:30 instead of 5:30,
Can we
I can do
adjust the time?
Yeah,
I can do
LPPC
it.
meet
Can-
Monday.
Can we adjust?
LPPC meet on
Time out.
Mondays.
Time out. Can we adjust the time at all on these board meetings?
Can we do
Okay.
6:30?
If we can do 6, I'm willing to be flexible on that.
Sarah? So if we move our meeting to 6:30 on Monday,
6:30 on
No,
Tuesday.
Tuesday.
Tuesday, I apologize, Tuesday.
She's not good. So
So
we need to make sure
6:30.
that she's here.
6:30.
Okay, that's on Tuesday.
So you could be here.
I do Monday and Tuesday. both
So
days.
therefore, we need
So-
to maybe adjust it to 6:30, right?
6:30 Tuesday, I could be there.
Okay.
6:30. Okay, so 6:30 Tuesday. Who can be there?
Miss Rhonda put it on our calendar because I'll forget.
So this will be the only item on the special board meeting.
The only item.
Now, pause again. Mr. Henry Taylor, are you ready for us to present to the LPPC and CPPC in order for them to pick apart with respect any and all aspects of the plan, and we were going to come right back to the table and discuss and make changes if and when necessary? Are you okay with this?
Well, that's
Tuesday.
I'm going down the roll.
March.
Come Tuesday, once we put it in the public, the LPPC and the CPPC will
That-
have 10 days to.
That's
I'm gonna
what we'll be deciding on. Then waiting for Tuesday.
So it's possible by the following Tuesday, we could have a meet, y'all could, or would it be the Thursday that y'all would need
I
it
think it
probably?
would depend on how fast we can meet with LPPC. As soon as we meet with them, then I would communicate with you.
Right.
So the following.
We're ready to go.
The following week, then it could be Tuesday or Thursday.
Yeah, I would think if that's the timeline, once we organize with them and can meet with them, once I meet with both of those groups, then I would say, okay, now we're ready to come back to you. Tell me what board meeting, or you want to hold a special board meeting, or do you want to wait to the next regular meeting to hold the?
Okay, so
Dr.
right
Palouse.
now, look at dates. I'm sorry. March 4th, Tuesday, is going to be a special board meeting strictly for the reorganization and the items that we sent to you to include in that to get the $5 million that we need. Then we'll meet March 6th, that Thursday, as our board workshop and special meeting that is already on the calendar.
Right,
We
with
know-
no, because that's still that we're
It's-
still in a
it's still
10-day
there.
window, so nothing's coming back at that meeting.
It's just our regular.
Business as usual.
Our business as usual on the 6th.
Yep.
Then business as usual is on the 20th. But the week of the 10th, we have it in our minds that if LPPC has met, if CPPC has met, we may call a special meeting that week.
Okay, so my clarification, I see where you're going with this. Do we have to wait the 10 days is pretty much the consensus of the question. Do we
So-
have to wait the 10 days? If
No.
they are ready to go on day 5, can we
Absolutely.
abide
There's-
by
it
day
just-
5?
That is the minimum number of days that you're allowed, and then that allows for time if the LPPC doesn't take any action, then it comes right back to the board, but just gives the window. If this is done on Tuesday and they both want to meet on Wednesday, then we're done. Then I've met with them, we're ready to come to you.
So that's why I said the window, looking at
The
the
10th.
windows for dates.
Yeah, the
So we
10th to
can
the 14th.
put it on our calendar, even though I know Ms. Rhonda's gonna send us some reminders. I'm looking at March the 4th, special board meeting. All we're talking about on that night is the reorganization and the budget and all that.
And it starts at 6:30
And it starts
PM.
at 6:30.
Yep.
Then March the 6th, we will meet again. It starts at 5:30 because it's just our regular workshop and special board meeting.
Yes, ma'am.
Then on March the 20th is our regularly scheduled board meeting.
Yes, ma'am.
Just have in mind that we may call a special board meeting sometime between the 10th and the 14th, depending on the outcome
The
of
LPPC,
the LPPC
and
the
CPPC.
That would
CPPC.
be the vote on the reorganization.
And that would be
based
the-
upon their feedback.
Correct. Everybody got, we got
Everybody
it?
good?
Everybody good?
Everybody good? Good. All right.
Question, just clarification, Madam President. On the special board meeting on Tuesday at 6:30, because we're discussing the reorganizational plan, will we have open mic comments before the plan?
Yes, we will. We always try to have public comments before we meet and vote on anything.
Yeah, we do that.
But please be mindful, if you're thinking about it, sign up when you first arrived, because I like to start on dime and keep it moving.
Okay. All right.
Motion to adjourn.
That's just a workshop.
It's just a
I
workshop.
just want to thank
So,
all of you for coming on a
Thank everyone
Saturday.
for coming, yeah.
And, Mr. Brown and Colonel for being here with me as well.
Absolutely. Been driving from Sheridan.
Everybody
But I
have
do
a
want to
wonderful
say real
weekend.
quick.
Mr. Riddle back there on the IT. For
I
coming
do
in on
want to
Saturday.
say
Good
real
job.
quick, even though we've had this information and we had a chance to review it, since we didn't get to have our workshop, I think that it was good that the public was able to see that and see what we're looking at. And it's not necessarily for us, but it's for our constituents too, and our staff.